Order the regular meeting of the Parkway Board of Education for March 2nd, 2011. Would you please rise and join the Board of Education in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Mrs. Calanda.
Mr. Applebaum?
Here.
Mrs. Castile? Mrs. Feldman? Here. Mr. Jacob?
Here.
Mrs. Mogerman?
Here.
Dr. Ciartino? Mr. Major?
Here. First up tonight, we have special recognitions. Our Parkway Teachers of the Year. Could I call on Wally Flick, President of the Alumni Association? Tonight we are pleased to recognize 27 outstanding Parkway teachers who have been chosen by their peers as the school's Teachers of the Year. Their dedication to students, community spirit, and personal commitment to excellence has earned them this honor. A special thank you to the Parkway Alumni Association for hosting a reception prior to tonight's meeting. And where did those apple cookies come from again? Secret recipe.
Cafeteria somewhere.
Excellent. School cafeterias have changed since I was a child. In addition, the Alumni Association provides monetary awards and crystal apples for the elementary, middle, and high school Teachers of the Year recipient, which they will receive at the appreciation evening. I'd like to ask Wally Flick to please carry on with the ceremony here.
Thank you, President Major. The Parkway Alumni Association is very happy to fund and administer several programs that support teaching and learning in Parkway. Tonight we are proud to host the reception celebrating our Teachers of the Year and personally congratulate and thank each of you for your continued outstanding work. Our reception tonight was made possible by the Al Burr Make a Difference Fund. This fund will also provide the cash, stipends, and crystal apples awarded to the elementary, middle, and high school Teachers of the Year recipients in April. On behalf of the Board of Directors, thank you and congratulations.
And thank you again to the Alumni Association. And April 2nd is the trivia night. Is that correct? Be there or be square. Next, I would like to ask Dr. Bonnie Maxey, Assistant Superintendent of Elementary Schools, to come forward and introduce the Elementary Teachers of the Year.
Good evening. Recognition of the Teacher of the Year recipients is always a special occasion. I would like to invite everyone to read the biographies in the recognition program. The contributions these educators have made to the lives of our students and their school communities is truly extraordinary. Thank you, teachers. When I read your names, would you please come forward to be recognized by Dr. Senti and the Board of Education. Teresa Waters, Barrett's teacher and mentor. Melissa Beal, Belle Reve Library Media Specialist. Sarah Rakers, Physical Education Teacher at Carmen Trails. Rhonda Graham, Claymont Mosaic's Gifted Education Teacher. Leanne Delaski, Craig's second grade teacher. I want to recognize Debbie Sachs, first grade teacher at Green Trails, who is their Teacher of the Year and unable to be here this evening, but I did want to acknowledge that selection. Elise Zivkovich, Henry Reading Intervention Specialist. Angie Guccione, Highcroft Ridge, fourth grade teacher. Adrian Broyles, Mason Ridge, vocal music teacher. Sue Baum, McKelvey, special education teacher. Roger Bergdorf, Oak Brook, fourth grade teacher. Michelle Brongard, Mosaics Academy gifted education teacher at Piermont Elementary. Debbie Shadaman, Riverbend kindergarten teacher and Parkway's elementary teacher of the year. Denise Ford, Ross School Mosaics gifted education teacher. Catherine Petcher, Sorrento Springs kindergarten teacher. Mandy Greeninger, Wren Hollow, third grade teacher. These are our elementary teachers of the year. How about one more round of applause?
And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our secondary Teachers of the Year. Obviously, this is no easy contest with the caliber of teachers Parkway puts in our classrooms every day for our kids. So I want to thank all our teachers for their hard work and dedication and the difference they make in the lives of all our kids. They're certainly our most valuable resource when they're working with our kids every day in the classroom. So thank you to all. I want to introduce first our middle school Teachers of the Year from Central Middle School, Carol Lena. Carol, come on down, please. From Northeast Middle School, Bill Anderson. Bill. You all could have seen Bill in action on our Monday kind of ad hoc school day that we had at North High. He did a wonderful job with the kids in the gymnasium. It certainly did count. From South Middle School, Jamie Fuller. Jamie. From Southwest Middle School, Monica Kilcullen. Monica. Our final middle school Teacher of the Year and the overall middle school Teacher of the Year from West Middle, Jody Isley. Jody. Now I'd like to introduce our high school Teachers of the Year. From our PACE program, Sarah Files. Sarah. From Central High School, Carol Simpson. Carol. From Fern Ridge High School, Karen DeKroger. Karen. From South High, Michelle Dempsey. Michelle. From West High School, Colleen O'Toole. Colleen. And finally, from North High, our high school teacher of the year and the Parkway School District teacher of the year as well, Russ Barton. Russ. Congratulations again to our secondary teachers of the year and to all our teachers of the year. Like I said earlier, it's an outstanding group and the competition is unbelievable. These people do a great job every day and we really appreciate your work. Thank you again and congratulations.
Congratulations again to all of our teachers. The board thanks members of the Teacher of the Year selection committees, chaired by Debbie Defani and from West Middle. And although I know they enjoy reading the nominations, it's not an easy task at all to narrow it down to the elementary, middle, and high school district teachers of the year. Thank you to all our teachers and their families, colleagues, administrators for joining us for this special occasion. It's absolutely an honor to have you all with us tonight, so thank you. At this time, we're going to take a brief break, and while I know that our agenda is pretty exciting this evening, as school board agendas go, if you have other obligations, shows, T-vote, or whatever, you're not going to hurt our feelings if you take off. So we'll take 5 and reconvene. Thank you.
Somebody said, light and fragile and feathered sky blue, thin and graceful, the sun shining through. She flies so high up in the sky, way out of reach of human eyes, light and fragile and feathered sky blue, thin and graceful, the sun shining through. She flies so high up in the sky, way out of reach of human eyes, light and fragile, she's feathered sky blue. thin and graceful, the sun shining through, and the only time that she touches ground is when that little boy of mine, dear little boy of mine.
Boy of mine, boy of mine, although my heart was aching, I seem to know that you'd want to go. Pride in your manhood waking, I'll be here waiting, dear, till at a glad dawn's breaking, I'll hear you say you're home to stay, dear little boy of mine, dear little boy of mine. I'll hear you say you're home to stay, dear little boy of mine, dear little boy of Come to me, my melancholy baby. Cuddle up and don't be blue. All your fears are foolish fancies, maybe. You know, honey, I'm in love with you. Every cloud must have a silver line. Just wait. Someday breathless charm. Won't you please arrange it? 'Cause I love you just the way you look tonight. With each word, your tenderness grows, tearing my fears apart. And that laugh that wrinkles your nose, it touches my foolish heart. Lovely, don't you ever change. Keep that breathless charm. Won't you please arrange it? 'Cause I love you just the way you look tonight. Ooh, tonight.
All right, we took a few liberties with the break there, but I think it was well worth it. We'll get back onto the agenda now. 4.0, additions, corrections, and modifications to the agenda. Dr. Senti.
We've added items 10.23, approval of an early retirement incentive for the classified staff. 10.24, approval of the 2011-12 salary percentage increase to the consent items.
Thank you. And on the initiative of the chair, I intend to move action item 11.0 to immediately following citizen statements, which is 5.0. We will take a brief break after the citizen statements so that all the board members can read all of the written comments that have been supplied to us. I think I've gotten most of the way through the stack, but I want to make sure everybody's considering all the information before we get to 11.0. With that, we do have, looks like 17 or 18 citizen statements. I would like to limit those statements, if we could, to 3 minutes each. That way we will spend about an hour on citizen statements and then be able to move on to the action item. So hopefully that meets with everybody's approval. Certainly if anybody would like to consolidate their remarks, yield their time to another speaker, we would absolutely be happy to entertain any moves like that. So, without further ado, I'd like to call on Lanny Mitchell, and if you would come up to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and then our official timer, Mr. Jacob, will start the clock.
Okay. I'm a little on the short side. Okay. I'm Lainey Mitchell, and the address is 1208 South Gaia Road. I'm 5 foot. Okay. Hi.
You brought a soundtrack.
My name is Lainey Mitchell, and I'm a mosaic specialist in the Parkway School District. Although I am just one individual standing before you speaking tonight, I'm not here alone, as several of my colleagues from Shenandoah Valley Elementary are here, and they too share the concerns I'm about to express. First and foremost, we as a staff would like to thank the task force, Project Parkway, the hundreds of volunteers, community and staff members who have spent countless hours studying and bringing forward the many proposals for the betterment of the Parkway School District. While we are certain that some of our points have been discussed and debated in the task force work on Project Parkway, we feel that even after revising the original start and end times, we still have a win-lose situation. A win for middle schools and 5 elementary schools in tiers 1 and 2, and a loss for 13 elementary schools in tier 3. We believe that as educators in the Parkway School District, we should strive for a win-win situation for all students. Even though the end time for the 3rd tier has been discussed, we were told that in order to maintain a 3-tiered bus system while also moving the middle school start time back, that someone would have to go last, and unfortunately, it would require a slightly later start and end time. It is our feeling that it has never been Parkway's practice to be satisfied with compromising the needs of one level at the expense of another. As educators, we are driven by data, so that while this proposal will enable all schools to have equal instructional days at 6 hours and 55 minutes, we do not feel that it takes into account the developmental stages of all students. When you examine the data and compare the start and end times of the premier surrounding school districts such as Clayton, Kirkwood, Lindbergh, and Rockwood, all their levels, elementary, middle, and high, do not attend school the same amount of instructional time. In fact, these districts differentiate their expectations for the elementary students by shortening the length of the school day. In addition, only one of the above-mentioned districts has an end time as late as the proposed time for Parkway's Tier 3. The Project Parkway's proposal states that enabling middle schools to start an hour later would not significantly change most other schools' start times. It also states that aside from middle schools, only 5 other schools' start times would change by more than 10 minutes. However, the data shows that 6 out of 18 elementary schools, roughly 30% of the entire district, would experience more than a 10-minute swing in start times. In addition...
I'm sorry, you're at 3 minutes, so if you could, another sentence or two.
Okay. Before you make any final recommendations and vote on this issue, We all hope that you will consider our feedback, our comments, and our data to work towards a win-win solution for all Parkway students. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You will receive a reply in writing. Thank you. You will receive a reply in writing. Jake Zimmerman.
Thank you very much, members of the board and members of the community. For the record, I'm Jake Zimmerman. I am the state representative for Missouri's beautiful 83rd District, and I live at 9046 Old Bonham Road. As a sidebar, before making very brief remarks so that I can get you back to the actual focus of your meeting, I do want to note that as you honored the Teachers of the Year, I understand that some of that was paid for by the Al Burr Foundation. And Dr. Burr was my high school principal during the final years of his career and was an extraordinary man. And to see his work continuing in this way leaves me feeling a little piece of pride. The reason I'm here before you this evening is to make sure that while I'm sure the folks I'm speaking to here know it already, that as many folks who care about public education in this community as possible are aware that there is a big election happening on April 5th, and that in addition to school board and city council elections, for the first time in 4+ decades, St. Louis County will be electing its county assessor. And again, this has not been an elected office in quite some time, and in my experience, even folks who are paying pretty close attention to politics may not be fully aware that this is on the ballot. So I want to make sure that everyone is aware, because doing property tax assessments right, in addition to its extraordinary impact on the taxpayers of St. Louis County, obviously has a profound impact upon this school district and anybody who cares about public services in St. Louis County. This is not the forum for a campaign speech, and I certainly will not give one, but I am the Democratic nominee in that campaign, and my hope only for this evening is that folks will take the opportunity to educate themselves about the fact that this election is happening. For anyone who may want to learn more about what this means in terms of St. Louis County, my staffer, Shalana Oliver, is with us this evening, and I would ask Shalana just to wave her hand in case anyone wants to chat with her after the meeting. And anyone who would like to learn more about us specifically is welcome to find us online at jakezimmerman.org. I will not take up any further of your time except to say thank you for your indulgence and to strongly encourage all members of the Parkway community to please take the time to get educated about the issues and plan to vote on April 5th. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmerman. You will receive a reply in writing. Let's see, Nan Goldberg.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I will be very brief.
Could you state your address for us, please?
10381 Oxford Hill Drive.
Thank you.
It's fitting for me to be here this evening since we're talking about education. I'm here to be sure that everyone knows that this weekend, SCOPE, which stands for Citizens and Science, Organized for Purpose and Exploration, is honored to be having a science and technology fair at the Creve Coeur Government Center. It's being hosted by Representative Jill Shoup and Representative John Deal. We will be having an amazing amount of experiments that will be given by higher education, by local businesses like Monsanto. Boeing will be there. There will be something for kids and parents of all ages. Our goal is to enhance what our educators do and to be able to provide that pathway from kindergarten through the rest of your life and your children's lives. If we don't engage the parents, we lose the children. We hope that everyone will come. It's obviously free, and I have flyers in the back of the room. And thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, and you will receive a reply in writing.
Thank you.
Kim, and I apologize for the if I butcher the pronunciation. Is it Beveridge? Yes.
My name is Kim Beveridge, 841 Guinevere Drive. Good evening, members of the school board. Thank you for your time in serving as our board members and considering our comments regarding this proposal of changing school start and stop times. As I said, my name is Kim Beveridge, and I'm a mother of 4 children in the Parkway District. I have 3 at Henry Elementary and 1 at West Middle. As the school board, you have been given the mission to make decisions that will strengthen our schools and benefit our children. I'm here to present my support for the proposal to change the start and stop times for our schools. We must put personal agendas and issues aside and make a decision that will benefit our children and our schools as a whole. While no solution is going to be optimal for everyone, the research has been done, and changing the time seems to be the best solution for our students. When you consider the result of giving our elementary school students the instructional time owed to them, our middle school students the benefit of extra rest, and the additional financial bonus to our district, this proposal must be passed. I urge you to keep the students' best interest in mind and vote to change the school start and stop times as proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, and you will receive a reply in writing. Is it Janie Viazjanko?
I'll pronounce it for you. Hi there, it's Janice Vizanko.
Oh, Janice, I apologize.
That's okay. I
And
live
your
at
address?
809 Westwood Drive. Good evening. My name is Janice Vizanko. I have 2 children at Parkway West Middle. In reviewing the proposed change to the start times, I'm a little perplexed. Research has shown that both middle school and high school students benefit from later start times, and yet the middle school students are the only ones in this group that will be starting later. The high school students will actually be starting earlier. It doesn't make sense. Is Parkway looking to reduce overall test scores for high school students? Research also shows that a later start time for high school students decreases the number of auto accidents. It seems Project Parkway is picking and choosing what research they choose to suggest for the adjustment of start times that fits more of a personal agenda. My second concern with the proposed time change is the 1-hour time difference for middle school. During the week in my home, everyone is up by 6 a.m. The extra hour in the morning means an hour of watching TV or gaming on the Xbox. I wouldn't mind an extra 20 to 30 minutes in the morning, but an hour seems excessive. The time we lose in the afternoon would otherwise be used for a variety of things: orthodontic appointments, homework, being outdoors. Furthermore, if you have a student who stays for an after-school program, they wouldn't be home until 4:15 at the earliest. To suggest they can then complete homework, eat dinner, and make it to a sporting practice seems unlikely. Is there an easy solution? Probably not. Ideally, Parkway could give a time change a trial run in one part of the district. You'll be more likely to show the benefit if there is a benefit. Pick one of the 4 high schools and their feeder schools on the middle and elementary school levels. Then give this a 1 or 2 year trial run. If there's an improvement, make it district-wide. If there's not, or we see a decrease in test scores, particularly at the high school level, we can revert back. Ultimately, if the board decides to go ahead with these time change recommendations, what happens if we see a decrease in high school test scores or an increase in automobile accidents? Will we be back here in another year or 2 discussing this again? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Y'all going to keep stepping on my line here, or you will receive a reply in writing. Tammy Morgan.
Tammy Morgan, 500 Corley Drive, Chesterfield. Dr. Senti and Parkway board members, I'm a Parkway mother of 3 children and am in a family where 19 children have attended Parkway. I am a former elementary school teacher and an active volunteer in 2 Parkway schools 2 to 3 times a week. In preparing for my remarks, I've talked to and feel I represent views of many parents, teachers, and myself in opposition to this proposal. Our desire is that you table this proposal and use the extra time to find other ways to save money. In the board's mission statement, it says, "The mission of the Parkway School District is to ensure all students are capable, curious, and confident learners." Please note the word all. This new proposal may possibly help out the middle school-aged kids, but does not help all students, in particular the elementary level. Are you thinking of all Parkway kids when 13 elementary schools are affected by this later ending time? When Parkway teachers say productivity after 3 o'clock is nil? When in the winter our kids will be walking home from the bus stop after dark, especially the VST kids who arrive after 5 p.m. in unsafe city neighborhoods? When a Parkway parent of a child with special needs says that that is too long of a day and too late for their child to attend his after-school therapies? When a Parkway parent who is also a pediatric doctor says that the late afternoon time is a waste for productivity from what she has seen in working with kids for 15 years. When research of children with ADHD says that any time after noon is a continual digression for their behaviors and concentration. When delayed after-school activities will affect important family and homework time, thus competing with the important research that shows when sitting down to eat dinner as a family 5 times a week, students are more likely to get better grades and less likely to have a substance abuse problem. When their teacher's preparation time is also cut to accommodate this change. What I propose is that you table this, find another way to save money, find a time that not just possibly helps the middle school-aged kids, but the elementary as well, thus fulfilling your mission statement to include all Parkway students. 3 of you are up for re-election this April, President Major, Mr. Jacobs, and Ms. Mogerman. Please be aware that we will be watching closely how you vote tonight as a reflection of how well you represent your constituents. April is just around the corner. Thank you.
Thank you, and you will receive a reply in writing. Bob Nickel.
I'm Bob Nickel, 14950 Chateau Village.
Thank you.
The reasons for changing the school day do not make sense. Your task force report is basing their recommendation off of research that features urban, low-income schools. Is Parkway low income? Your own task force report also states that the quality of teaching and the structure of the day were more important than the amount of time in school. The task force also says there is little data on the benefits of early, later start times. We have found data that says there is poor learning time in the afternoon. Ask anybody who teaches children after 3 p.m., and they will tell you the same. I have 5 children. I can tell you that's very true. The task force compares our district's start-ending times and time in school with others in Missouri. Just because they are doing it doesn't mean it's beneficial for our students. Why are we following others? Parkway is one of the leaders in academic achievement for our kids. Most of us live in Parkway because it was always a good school district. Why change? It appears the bottom line of this proposal is to save money. Have you driven in West County at 4 p.m. when all our buses are going to be on the road from the elementary schools at the beginning of rush hour? How is that going to save money? It also appears the board is rushing this decision against parent and teacher wishes before Dr. Senti leaves. So according to our task force report, the interim superintendent will inherit that decision, and any perceived negatives related to its implementation will not be associated with the new superintendent. Don't change the school day. Thank you, and I will see my reply.
Appreciate the acknowledgement. Jim Dunn.
Hi, Jim Dunn, 2058 Sunflower Court. and I'll apologize ahead of time. I've got a pretty nasty cold I'm fighting. I'm the parent of a elementary school student, a middle school student, and a high school student in the Parkway system, so I have the perspective of all the student groups impacted. Elementary schools impacted by the schedule, including Highcroft Ridge, will be starting 30 minutes later than normal and dismissing 50 minutes later than normal. We feel this large shift in the times will cause many students to have a lack of focus later in the day. The 8:55 start times will disrupt the schedules of working parents, causing them to have to find and pay for childcare, possibly earlier in the morning. And, you know, younger elementary kids cannot be left alone while their parents go to work. The Parkway report says there's a shift from, to quote the report, morningness to eveningness, which I'm not sure those are words, but in ages 10 to 17 years old. This ignores 2/3 of the elementary school kids. We feel like that research should reflect all ages impacted. Parkway report dedicates a significant amount of time to start times, ending times, dismissal times, length of the school day, but it fails to address the quality of education for elementary school kids later in the day. We're very concerned about this omission. During most of the winter, the skies dark around 4:30, which means children, including kindergarten and elementary age kids, will be crossing the street and walking home in the dark. Commuting students from the inner city will be getting home between 5 and 6, again, in the dark. This is a risk and a burden to the students and those families in particular. We don't feel like they should be ignored. Many sports practices, music lessons, tutoring, after-school activities begin at 4. Many children may not be able to participate. Many teachers who may supplement their income or do things because they love what they do and they donate their time will be impacted as well. Therefore, we would like to ask the school board the following questions. Why do some elementary schools remain on or close to their schedule and others are penalized? Is Parkway prepared to offer free childcare for working parents impacted? Is Parkway prepared to accept degradation of standardized test scores, much less normal learning for those students who will inevitably take tests later in the day? Why has the impact of quality of education for elementary school students late in the day not been addressed? Have the teachers and staff of the elementary schools impacted been consulted and polled regarding this change? If so, why has this information not been presented? If not, why not? And finally, most importantly, do you consider it an acceptable risk to have young children cross streets and walk home at dark? Do you? We appreciate the efforts to save the school district money, especially in this tough economy.
You're 3 minutes. If you could wrap it up in a sentence or two, please.
You got it. The cost to the elementary school students is exceeded clearly by any perceived benefit, and we ask that you vote no on this issue. Go back, do your homework, and come back with an alternate proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, and you will receive a reply in writing.
I have my notes, several other parents' notes, and a petition for some kids. Who do I leave that with?
Mrs. Calanda. Luke Bader.
Good evening, Parkway Board, school members, and I'll be brief with you. I live at
Thanks.
I live at 12946 Camp Hill Court. I'm a trustee and a resident of Old Farm Estates subdivision, and I wrote out a letter for you guys, and I submitted that earlier, so if you get a moment to read it, that would be great. But I'm here tonight to ask you for your support of the Parkway license agreement with our subdivision, and I'd like to defer the rest of my time to Sam Craig. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you. And you will receive a reply in writing. Let's see, I guess if there's no objection, I'll call on Mr. Craig at this point, even though it's out of sequence on the sign-up sheet.
Good evening. My name is Sam Craig. I live at 13135 Greenbow Drive. I'm here tonight representing the trustees of Old Farm Estates subdivision and currently serve as the president. We request your approval of the license agreement in Section 10 of the agenda. Its purpose is to put in writing an informal understanding of what we have had for many years regarding a small strip of the Fern Ridge property near the entrance to our subdivision. About 30 years ago, our trustees decided we needed to make our entrance more attractive. They quickly realized that they had to include Parkway Strip along Old Farm Drive in this process because most people believe this land belongs to us. My understanding is that they reached some type of an agreement with the district, though that was long ago, and unfortunately I don't believe it was ever written down. Either way, the trustees have been maintaining this ground ever since, thinking they were doing it with Parkway's blessing. A couple of years ago, some confusion was created about whether the district actually approved of us doing this maintenance. The trustees came to the conclusion that we needed something more formal. Accordingly, we approached the administration and negotiated the agreement before you. You should know that we've been debating this issue for well over 2 years. It's been discussed at general meetings, trustee meetings, and in newsletters. The trustees have been very clear about our desire to maintain this ground. As you well know, organizations seldom have 100% agreement, and we're no different, but the vast majority of the feedback we've received has been consistently favorable. Acting on behalf of the Old Farm Estates lot owners, per our indenture, the trustees approved our participation in this agreement by a vote of 8-2. At this time, I'd like to ask those trustees and owners from Old Farm Estates who are here tonight and in favor of the agreement to please stand. Thank you all. In conclusion, Parkway and Old Farm have been good neighbors for over 40 years. We truly appreciate the excellent relationship we've shared. The trustees request your approval of this license agreement because we believe it will be good for us both. The district will retain ownership of the ground and be protected from liability. And with your help, we'll have an opportunity to make a good first impression at the entrance to our subdivision. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. You will receive a reply in writing. Now, Jerry Goldberg, but looks like there's a line through it. Mr. Goldberg, would you like to? Oh, thank you. Thank you. Steve Glazer. Is it Glazer? Okay. Rebecca Crone.
Whoa. Oh, now I broke it.
Oh, you don't have to be constrained by the podium.
Hello. I'm Rebecca Crone. I live at 10 Wildway Circle, Manchester, Missouri. I'm the parent of 2 Hannah Woods, and it has long been a concern of mine and others in our subdivision, Town and Country South, that Hannah Woods has had a dismissal time of just about 5 minutes after Parkway South High. As you know, we are the only elementary school in the Parkway District in such close proximity to a high school, so it's always baffled me as to why Hannah, of all the 18 elementary schools, has had a dismissal time directly after the high school, which is 1 block away. There are a large number of Hannah students that walk home every day in our subdivision, as we don't have bus transportation in the front part of our subdivision. And these kids have to cross Hannah Road, which they do have a crossing guard, and then they have to walk among the high school drivers that either live in our subdivision or use our subdivision as a cut-through to Sulphur Springs Road. There's a constant stream of high school traffic for about 10 to 15 minutes every day that causes dangerous conditions for our students that walk home. Over the course of the school year, the task force giving their proposals each time, Hannah Woods has been at one of the tiers that did not interfere with the start and end times of Parkway South High. So we figured this problem would be solved for us, that we would not have to deal with this traffic. It was not until yesterday evening at the PTO meeting at Hannah Woods that we were informed as parents that Hannah somehow magically got moved to Tier 1 and we were not told about it. It was not there was not an email sent or anything, and Mr. Shelton told us yesterday evening that Hannah now, in fact, had been moved to Tier 1, which is the exact same time as the high school. So now we will be dealing with these dangerous situation in the morning as well as the afternoon with the exact same schedule. So my concerns, number one, obviously, are the safety issues of our students that are walking, as well as the fact that we weren't informed about this until the night before the vote, which obviously is tonight. I contacted Assistant Superintendent Dr. Maxey this morning to share concerns over the safety issues, and had a very nice conversation with Dr. Maxey, and she was, listened to all the concerns, and had said that, in fact, it was put on the website of this change, which was not true at the time I talked to her this morning. I printed this morning off the website at 10:40, and Hannah Woods was still on Tier 3. So I'm not sure when the change was made. As of this afternoon, it was in fact changed on the website, but it wasn't this morning. So we were not, informed of this, and had we been, I definitely would have made my concerns known a little bit earlier than tonight. I teach at a large high school. I know how high school kids drive, and I am home every day at about 3 o'clock when my kids are getting off school to walk home, and honestly, the Parkway South High School students, the majority of them, I'm sure they're all great kids, but they drive at 30-plus miles an hour. They don't adhere to any of the stop signs. They don't look for the pedestrians. It really is a huge, huge safety concern for our kids. And as I mentioned, we're now going to be dealing with it in the morning as well as the afternoon. I would encourage all the board members as well as Parkway administrators just to come and see, what sort of safety issues this proposes, that this is for our kids. Come about 3 o'clock any day. On occasion, we have Manchester police presence, but I haven't seen a Manchester police officer in our subdivision at dismissal time in months. So occasionally that does help, but that's a temporary fix.
Okay, you are at 3 minutes, so if you can give us a couple more sentences.
Absolutely. I would just like to ask for some additional consideration be given to this huge issue, since it seems not to have been a concern to my knowledge at this point, specifically with Hannah Woods and Parkway South being at the same times. Even if Hannah was moved to Tier 2 with Green Trails and the middle schools, this would be a full half hour at the beginning and the end of the day that our start and end times would be different. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You will receive a reply in writing. Dan Sayer.
Good evening. My name is Dan Sayer. I live at 300 High Meadows.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to all of the voices that are speaking tonight about the start and stop time. I primarily want to go before you to just say that I think I'm trying to represent a group of people that are interested in doing what's best. We understand that there are problems either direction. Adjust it, make it longer, keep it the same. There are conflicts, and we may be missing an opportunity to enhance education. I did what I think most parents did, just tried to find whatever research we could and try to get an understanding or a handle on it. I find that a majority of the people that I speak with on a regular basis, we're interested in doing what's best for our kids, what's going to help. And we are primarily focused on helping that cause and not necessarily letting enrichment programs, things like that for after school inhibit that. So we would like, I shouldn't say we because I don't necessarily speak for that many, but I would like to throw just kind of support towards please, a statement saying please do your best as the educators of our children to do the best you can to help them. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And you will receive a reply in writing. Charlie Potts.
My name is Charlie Potts. My address is 23 Graymore Drive. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I'm an alumnus of Parkway Central High School, class of 1981. I attended Belle Reve Elementary School, Central Junior, Central High. I have a son that graduated Central High in 2010. I have a daughter at Central Middle, son at Green Trails in third grade. I was on various committees at the time Parkway made the decision to convert from junior high schools to middle schools, and I remember many, many evenings the discussions revolving around where to put sixth grade. I'm not sure we still have an answer on that one, but at the time I don't recall there ever being a discussion involving the start times for middle school. But in addition to that, I've recently spent time on a Project Parkway committee specifically talking about future projects for Parkway. In short, I've been part of the past, the present, and hopefully will continue to be part of the future of Parkway. My statement this evening is involved modifying the start times and extended school day times for elementary school. This proposal has been studied and developed through hundreds of hours of work by countless Parkway employees and citizens of the district. And I believe this proposal adequately addresses the following three important issues: start and end times for Parkway Middle Schools. Parents and teachers throughout students at 7:25 a.m. I ask all citizens and the board to be careful about research, because I remember sitting in a committee 15 years ago in which someone said that research by a Princeton PhD board found that middle school brains wake up earlier than high school brains. As the parent of a middle schooler, that is false. I've never understood how any reasonable person can also believe that middle school age children getting out of school at 2:15 in the afternoon is reasonable. I live right up the hill here. It disturbs me to see 11 and 12-year-olds wandering the neighborhood at 2:15 and 2:20 in the afternoon with nowhere to go and nothing to do. I'm not saying that's Parkway's problem to address, but it is a concern that we should all be aware of. Time, not money, is also currently the most important issue in Parkway, not money. The board issue has provided us the bond issue has provided us with an amazing ability to do the things that Parkway said it would do. My son, who's in third grade at Green Trails, is in a classroom of 16 kids. My daughter, at the same age in that school, was in a classroom of 22. We did what we said we would do. The problem now is time. I was on a task force, a future Project Parkway, where we came up with amazing ideas and input from citizens that said we would like these things at the elementary school level. Same response to every single issue. We don't have time. We currently send elementary school students to school 20 minutes less than high school and middle schoolers. We need the time. We need the time to invest it in the education of these children.
Speaking of time, that is 3 minutes. So.
Input from all areas that have been collected, it's been considered, and as a citizen, a parent, and a previous student, I encourage the Board of Education to approve this measure as written. Thank you.
Thank you, and you will receive a reply in writing. And 81 was a heck of a high school graduating class, wasn't it? Rich Bach, looks like it has a line through it. Is it?
No, he's not.
Okay. Alicia, is it Hayek? Hayek. You yield back? The lady from High Valley yields her time to Lauren Calero. That was the final speaker. So with that, did I miss anybody? I didn't sign up, but can I just say something for 1 minute? We do have a procedure, and we've really got to stick to it. If you have a written comment, you're welcome to give it to Mrs. Calanda. Okay. All right. Well, we're actually ahead of schedule. Is that possible? I guess we have received some more written comments. I'm not sure I've seen everything. So with your indulgence, we're going to take 5 minutes, and it may stretch a little longer than that. I just want to make sure that all the board members have read everything that's been presented to us. Then we will reconvene and take up item 11.0. Thank you.
that time can never change that strange new music of love. You appear, and I hear songs sublime, sung that I'm incapable of. So dear, let me hold you near while we treasure every, so that time can never change that strange new music of
Thank you, and we are back on the record. One slight deviation here. Normally in our Section 9, we recognize individuals in the audience. Any education students tonight? Do we have a Boy Scout in the house? Oh, we did?
You can't see them.
Oh, thank you. Do y'all mind standing and letting us know where you're studying? Great. Thanks for being here. Sorry about that. Might be due for some glasses. And then do we have a Boy Scout here also? Yes. Which troop? Troop 631. Thank you for being here. All right, and did I miss any other hands on education students? Okay. Then without any further ado, item 11.0, action item, call on Desi Kirchhofer, Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Education.
Thank you, President Major, Vice President Jacob, board members, Dr. Sente, and Secretary Kalanda. Appreciate the time, and audience members viewing at home that we have as we stream online. I also want to thank the parents and teachers and citizens who came forward tonight to make their statements. I know that I have corresponded on different occasions with many of you, and I know the correspondence back and forth has been very cordial, and there has been a lot of acknowledgement about the work that people have done, and a lot of thanks and appreciation for the time and efforts people have put forward. So I appreciate their time and effort to voice their opinions and concerns. Tonight, for me, I think I probably need to do something with this F4 button. Get that up there. I think our logo up there says a lot. It's become very meaningful symbol as we work forward with community, staff, and citizens to design the future for our kids. We've already seen some of the Project Parkway initiatives move forward, and tonight we bring another one after months and months, over a year of collaboration and consideration, dialogue, compromise, and we bring a proposal for you tonight to consider for voting for your approval for new school start and end times and lengthening the elementary school day. Some of our discussion items around lengthening the elementary school day, some of the findings that came out of the reports, and some of our early findings. And I've got to go back. We're going to try in a few slides here to encompass almost 2 years of work and findings. And actually, similar to when we talked about the middle school staffing last year, I want to remind you that really, even though these conversations were in depth recently, the conversations have been going on an awful long time prior to that, and the Project Parkway group has been able to move forward and been able to get to a place where we want to present the proposal this evening. But some of our discussion items and things for consideration were that our elementary teachers expressed a concern over their ability to effectively teach the curriculum in the current format. And one of our speakers tonight alluded to the fact that time seems to be always in the way. And when we think of 20 minutes of instruction, it doesn't necessarily seem like it's crazy length for a day, but it actually comes out to almost 10 days of school or instruction over the course of a school year. Currently, our school day in our elementaries is 6 hours and 35 minutes, which is 15 to 20 minutes shorter than our middle and high schools and the second shortest in St. Louis County. While it's been pointed out this evening on several occasions that doesn't necessarily equate to a different education, but it certainly is what we do with that time. And that has to be after careful consideration with our elementary principals and their staffs to make sure that we are obligated to fulfill our mission by doing the right things during that time. This also will help us establish the district-wide standards of 6 hours and 55 minutes, a day that makes that curriculum more equitable and the instruction throughout the day, K through 12. Also, a standard length of day at all levels reduces the number of different school starting times in it. And I don't know if people know this or not, but we currently, although we tried to be efficient with the bus routing and run similar three-tiering system, we actually have 7 different start times for our school, and that's not including the alternative programs or early childhood. So this would allow us to move from 7 to 3 for certainly a way more efficient bus schedule. When looking at the start and end times of our schools, some things for discussion and consideration. Currently, our middle schools begin at 7:25, but the building you're in right now actually starts at 7:20 a.m. This is followed by our high schools at 8 a.m. and most elementary schools between 8:25 and 9 a.m. currently. The task force reported to us that most districts begin high schools first, followed by the middle schools and then elementary schools. In a lot of cases, that model has been followed because parents may have a high school or middle school kid and they would like their son or daughter to get home prior to the elementary school arriving so they don't come home to an empty house. Parents and teachers have consistently expressed a concern that 7:20 or 7:25 start time is too early, particularly for the middle school age students. I'll give you an example. This week when we had a lightning strike at Northeast Middle, we sent out an alert now to notify the parents. We sent that out at 5:35 because we were waiting for the last possible time, and we missed kids that were in the city already waiting for their bus stop at 5:35 a.m. Project Parkway Task Force studied the school start and end times and analyzed the research regarding the sleep patterns in children's adolescents. The task force findings validated concerns about the early middle school start times. The task force concluded that start times of 8 a.m. or later are preferable. And I think that's important to note. I mean, as we worked through and compromised, that was part of their task force. And that a later start time would be beneficial for young adolescents in terms of their overall health and opportunity for success in school. So when we look at the start and end times and we go back to the origins of the needs assessment and the original group looking at what those findings told us, 2 major objectives were based on those findings. And one of those, and alluded a lot already about the middle school start time, but was to improve the middle school start and end times. And the end time comes in that, and one of our speakers also addressed this concern as well, that there could be a little bit of mischief every once in a while when 11, 12, 13-year-olds are unsupervised at 2:15, 2:30 in the afternoon. The other finding and recommendation was to lengthen the elementary school day by 20 minutes. So just to take you through a little bit more of the process, those were the original findings from task force reports. Then we took that task force report to the Project Parkway Steering Committee. They analyzed the data. There was a vote taken at that meeting, and that was discussed, and it was agreed that another committee would be formed to look at finalizing a formal proposal. So originally, a task force presented data, presented findings, presented research, and then it was recommended by the steering committee that a connections committee take over and look at those findings and research and make a final proposal. At that time, that information was also shared with the school board, and those task force were. So the connections committee then went back and looked at the proposal, reviewed it, discussed it, and came forward in December with a presentation to the board of things to expect. And they took the original example listed in the appendix of the task force report, which had 3 tiers. And those 3 tiers had times starting at 7:50, 8:30, and 9:10 a.m. with a length of 6 hours and 55 minutes at each level. With that 9:10 a.m. start, it sent the ending time for many of our middle schools, or many of our elementary schools, past 4 o'clock. So what happened is, as we publicized those findings, or that original proposal, we received community and feedback from the schools on the proposal that after 4 o'clock was an unacceptable time. We brought back to Superintendent's Council to continue to review the feedback. We also tried to get the Connections Committee back together, but snow days did not help with scheduling issues. But as we moved forward, we looked at, as the Superintendent's Council reviewed it, and came back with a final proposal where we did compromise with including an earlier start time for that first tier at 7:45, and then asked Transportation to continue analyzing and just get those routes down. In a 3-tier system, typically Will has really asked for about 45 minutes in between the tier, and we ask him to really start sharpening up those routes and try to get them as close as can. And now we've cut his time down. In order to do that, by putting 5 minutes on the front end, we ended up being able to reduce that 4:05 ending time from the elementaries to 3:50. So we gained 15 minutes on the back end. But that was after a lot of sweat and toil between Will and his staff and Transportation. So we appreciate his efforts as he wanted to try to accommodate those concerns. In the form of a recommendation, when combined with lengthening the elementary school day by 20 minutes, we would be able to accomplish the following: enable schools to have equal instructional days and time, enable the middle schools to start almost an hour later without significantly changing most other starting times. Of the 23 schools, of the remaining 23 schools, this was without the middle schools in consideration. We know we're moving those significantly. 18 would change by 15 minutes or less. The other 5 schools have a range of 20 to 50-minute shifts in their schedules from where they currently are. This also responds to the concerns of many elementary parents and staff who thought the previous 4:05 ending time was too late. We wanted to provide a reasonable start time for high schools while allowing appropriate time for students to get to extracurricular activities. Many of our secondary sport fields and our lower level games throughout the entire St. Louis region begin at 4 o'clock, and for lighting situations and purposes. And also at the end of the day, sometimes we were taking kids out early to get to those 4 o'clock starts, so we want to try to avoid that. So in consulting with people who work with, and some of the coaches who work with the activities, and the athletic directors thought this was a really nice move, so they didn't have to do that any longer. And also, this proposal allows for a more efficient transportation system, provides a start and end schedule that is more consistent with our neighboring school districts at the elementary and middle school levels. If we look at it, the And it also still provides a later high school start time than the majority of neighboring districts. The high school start time kind of falls within the average. I know my daughter high school starts at 7:20 currently, but the range in the area schools was from 7:20 to 8:15, so this falls 7:45, pretty much in the average of the high schools in the area. Also, in consideration of the end time for our elementary, 3:50, if you think about school districts that would need to have a three-tiered system like us, you need to think large, and you need to think Hazelwood and Rockwood. And those are the comparable districts that would need the forms and the size of transportation that Parkway provides, and they have exactly the same ending time that we would be moving to at 3:50. So that was also a consideration. On the slide before you, you can see our recommended new start and end times on the three tiers. We have our four high schools and our alternative program on the first tier with the elementaries, Piermont, Oak Brook, Sorrento Springs, and Hannah. And the second tier is Green Trails, Central Middle, and the rest of the middle school, Central, Northeast, West, South, Southwest Middle. And then the remaining elementaries were in Tier 3. And also, when you think about that in working with our transportation and just the window of time to fit in a 6-hour and 55-minute day, you really only have so much room to play. And I think we've done a really nice job of condensing that time frame. Because if you think about our very first time, we're starting school at 7:45, and then the range is all the way to 3:50 before 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So we're in that 8 to 4 range, and serving 17,500 kids' needs is a difficult task. And so I do think that this comes very, very close to what we need to consider and recommend tonight. So at this point, I'd like to entertain any of the questions that the board may have.
Mrs. Mogren?
Thank you. First thing I think we need to talk about, and to clear up a little bit of misperception, is the board in no way did this to save money. That's not even a discussion. That maybe is a plus if it works out that way, but that was never a reason for doing this. This was truly from Project Parkway, and as I said, that was never our motivation at all. Secondly, we need to discuss about the minutes in the elementary school day. Back before Proposition R, we had our current realities, which was, help me, the year, was it 05?
This is 2005, 2006 is when we
and that's the first time we started discussing the lack of time in the elementary day.
And part of that was that we weren't meeting some of the state-required minutes at the time.
We were concerned that with all, not just the core, we were worried about the core subject and the fact that when you break it down, the Missouri School Improvement Program, you can look on their website, they break it down on how many minutes you are to spend in an elementary year on certain subjects. And because we offer, what do we offer? It doesn't include recess, orchestra, lunch, or library in these minutes, and we offer those to our kids. And the concern is we're so tight on minutes as it is that we're not meeting state requirements always. So to me, that's we have to do this. We have to add the 20 minutes. I don't know if anyone wants to add on to that.
And just, I want to make another comment that I think I skipped a bullet point on here, but when we looked at the task force reports, we really didn't find any conclusive evidence. I know there were some indications earlier that late in the day and that earlier may be beneficial in the elementary, but it was really inconclusive in the task force findings. Really what they told us is that the elementary is the most flexible. So if you've got to change some times, they're going to be the group that's going to be the most flexible about moving those times and shifting. So I think that's important to note.
But I think we all need to be clear about that. We're just not adding 20 minutes because we think we need 20 minutes. I mean, just it's not a willy-nilly decision. And maybe Kathy or Bonnie, you want to add to what I said. But since 05, we've been talking about this.
Join Desi at the microphone?
So it's not something new. It's something we've been talking about since, I know, at least since 05.
Well, and it has been a conversation and a goal with the elementary principals for more than 8 years. We started looking, we had a study that we called the Elementary School Day, and we started looking at curriculum And what can we remove from the elementary school day to capture more instructional time for the core requirements?
And strings was brought up at that time, I remember.
Exactly. And yet we knew that that's part of the rich program that we offer our children in Parkway, and so we do not want to remove fine arts as an opportunity for children. And so, but there were other things that we took out of the curriculum. Many teachers, and I could include myself in that. When I think about when I was a classroom teacher, I had some units, studies that I wanted to offer children that were not part of the curriculum, but with the defining of the curriculum that has come over the years from the State Department and our wanting to provide the richest high-quality curriculum for our children to compete with others as they go out into the world and the marketplace for university and colleges, etc. We had to remove things from the curriculum, still keeping the rich opportunities which we know we value in Parkway in regard to fine arts and other things. So that fed into Project Parkway, taking this as a necessary topic to study, and brought forth all this other research that has fed into it. But finding more time, chunks of time, uninterrupted time for teachers to be able to teach the curriculum has been an issue.
And
long-standing.
The district is not going to dictate, is my understanding, to the elementary schools how they use that time. For example, I've heard people talk about maybe we could add 5 minutes to lunch, which I know many elementary parents would love that. So that gives them a little more flexibility internally with their own scheduling to do what's best for their kids. Am I right?
As this has moved forward, the elementary principals every month we have a session on planning for scheduling, and so we are looking at it. But it will not be a district-wide saying that you will teach this at this time and this at this time. Schools have to develop the schedule with their staff and teachers and meeting the core curricular minutes as well as the unique needs of the school community and the programs that need to be offered for children. Teachers need to be involved in that planning.
Okay. So,
I would like to add, 8 years ago when this started as a need is why this board, 5 years ago, established Goal 1, which was the implementation of the Guaranteed Viable Curriculum. And viable is in there because what we knew is, as we defined the curriculum, we didn't have time to teach it in elementary. So it has been our goal for 5 years, and the Project Parkway started by saying, do we have time, remember that 2 years ago, to teach the curriculum?
And I remember.
And that was the first information that came back is, no, we don't.
And the board retreat many years ago when you first gave us that principal's report on the...
Yes, the elementary day.
So in my mind, this is a non-negotiable with 20 minutes, and I hope someone else will chime in on this, but...
I'd be happy to chime in. I remember when Kathy, when I was on your curriculum council a few
that
years
was a
ago, when I was a parent, not a board member, and I really only had a parent's bird's eye view of what was going on. I was really shocked to hear that there was so much out there that the teachers didn't have time to teach. And another thing that struck me is the first time somebody said to me that the elementary students are picking up almost 10 days of instructional time, I thought to myself, what does that mean? What does that mean in the life of a child? And then I remember when one of my children had their tonsils out, and they missed exactly 10 days of school. And let me tell you, what a child learns in 10 days in a Parkway school is an enormous amount of learning. And to be able to give our children that gift of an extra 10 days of school, to me, it's just invaluable. And it's true our kids are rushed through lunch because they're trying to get that curriculum taught. And I think it would be great if our teachers could have a few extra minutes in the afternoon to have their kids, at elementary I'm talking about, stand up and do some jumping jacks, walk around the room, go get a drink, do some things to kind of revive them when the after lunch time, the sleepiness might set in. I think just having this extra 20 minutes would give the teachers a little bit of flexibility to engage their students in a little bit more activity in the afternoon to get them really focused on the curriculum. So yes, Dee, I'm with you 100%.
Well, and one other comment that we have established over the last 5 years, and especially through Project Parkway, and I don't know how to remind you about this other than to say, are you ready? Shaolin's Bullseye,
yes.
Which we built together that we have to remember the state requirements are the minimum. And the GLEs and the CLEs and all that we build our curriculum, it's minimum. What else do we want to have in Parkway? And that's also, I mean, it's the minutes and the time and the expectation, but it's also, how is Parkway different? And it's beyond minimum. And what we offer to our students is beyond the minimum. And to think that we have one of the shortest days, it's just, as one of the gentlemen said, it just doesn't make, we can't even do more because of time. So I think we want to do more than minimum. And I think that's why we're bringing this forward.
I guess if you didn't say bullseye, I certainly was, because from my first minute on the board, that's something that struck me, is Parkway is not about doing minimums. Parkway is not about we're good enough. I have had it slam me in the forehead over the last 2 years in Project Parkway that we are not good enough. And this board member is absolutely interested in what does it take to get better. World class is where is what our kids demand.
And I want to go back to that current reality meeting when I stood right up there and showed the picture of the kindergarten student and when that student would be graduating. And I think, Bruce, that is what drives us. So I'm going to ask Dr. Maxey, the kindergarten students we are enrolling right now are graduating.
The class of 2023.
And I would love to say that we will change times in the next, but we may not. So we really are looking at these kids and what we owe them and how we do that for them. So.
I also think I'm hoping what elementary schools will do. Right now they have after-school activities. Some of them do have before-school activities. I'm hoping that all shifts to before-school activities. It will answer a lot of issues that parents have with before-school care, et cetera. And if that just becomes routine, it just makes sense, I think.
Scheduling and planning a new schedule is on our high priority list and what we are working on at the time.
And that's up to the individual schools too.
Yes, they have to determine it.
Change is difficult. I understand that.
Okay. Tom?
I was going to, and speaking of the timing of this, I mean, we just had a vote on full-day kindergarten, and I know that there was a lot of consideration given to how this would fold into that with regards to transportation, that sort of thing. So it seems to me like it's an opportune time to look at the overall picture, because that's the way it was kind of presented to us on our last meeting, well, the meeting before last. And I think that's important to note, that we're looking, it's more of a comprehensive picture on the whole district works, because it's not a matter of, I mean, there's so many moving parts to all that, you know, everything, I mean, one thing that shows that everything affects something else. And what we're looking at here doesn't even show the kindergarten aspect of it. But that does have an impact, and I think it's an opportune time to look at this.
True, but it's all connected. And so we need to look at how do we serve children with a high-quality educational program and put it together in such a way that's developmentally appropriate at each stage and age of children in the elementary school. So that takes a lot of thoughtful planning with all the teachers involved together in the school. So there's some things that can be mutually the same, certainly meeting minimum requirements for academics, and we're not about minimums, as you've said. We want high quality and to do the maximum. And of course, that includes intervening and supporting children who, you know, if there's, you have to go back and reteach, that's time. If you need to accelerate, that's time. And so all of this and how to put it together is something that we are going to have to work together. It's all connected.
Well, I think the Connections Task Force was exactly right. And Tom, you kind of touched on the money aspect, and Dee, I concur. We did not, money was not the driver of the beginning of this process. In fiscal year 2011-2012, the state of Missouri is going to cut their allocations to education. The entire budget's going to lose $500 million. Education is about a third of the state's budget. From a money aspect, And again, it's not the driver, but we don't live in a vacuum. And we had a candidate for the auditor's or county assessor's office here this evening. If anyone thinks that an elected assessor is going to produce the same numbers for assessed values in St. Louis County as have been the tradition for the last 30 years, I submit you are naive. So we are blessed to live in a community that supports us to a profound level. I grew up in Colorado. There was no public school district in Colorado that could frankly hold a candle to Parkway. And we cannot ignore the money in any decision we make. And I would point out that the first cuts the state made last year were in categorical funding for parents as teachers, transportation, and summer school. For Parkway, which is a hold harmless district under the state's foundation formula, when they cut funding to the foundation formula, that is such a small piece of our pie that we almost don't feel it. Categorical funding, that's dollar for dollar. We lost money, the same as districts that get 85% of their revenue from state. We get about 5%. So transportation is a categorical section. There have been some noises in the state legislature that they won't go after that cash cow again. However, when push comes to shove, there is an alliance between the city and the country that in this state, which revolves around the foundation formula, and I am not optimistic that Parkway is ever going to benefit from those battles. So, while it's not the driver, we dare not leave any pennies on the table. And I think a three-tiered bus system is simply responsible governance, and catering to anything else is really a luxury we can't afford. If we're talking, I don't know how you convert buses into teachers in the classroom, but I am passionately in favor of teachers in the classroom over
Just to comment
buses.
on your efficiency comments, Bruce, and the financial thing. That was a discovery that happened as we went through and kept reworking the bus routing. And that certainly was not a driving force. So that's a good point to make. But we were able to see that we were able to evenly balance the routes by doing some changes. And it doesn't happen without extending the day either. That's the other key component. One doesn't happen without the other. So it did become more efficient.
And we were always told in past years we could never change the middle school start time because it will cost too much money. But this is like the perfect storm. Adding the 20 minutes and changing the start time allows us to actually be more efficient. And I've said this before, that Will Rosa is my hero for figuring out how to do that because we've been told for years it can't be done, it will cost us too much money. So I know you put a lot of hard work into this, and there's a lot of hard work still to go on it, but we appreciate the efforts.
Okay, and I apologize for hijacking the conversation to dollars,
good.
but
That's good.
Mr. Jacob.
Just a brief comment, Desi, and thank you for being the chairperson on this.
It's my pleasure.
Many of you are familiar with...
You wearing a vest tonight?
There's a bullseye on your back. Many of you are
But
familiar
it's the Parkway bullseye, don't worry.
Many of you are familiar with the book, The World is Flat. And that just points out that adding 20 minutes to our day for our children is actually puny when we think of what our children are going to have to be competing with in this world. They already compete, without even knowing it, with the Chinese, who are making great strides, with India, Japan. And that's going to be the world they live in, which will be so much different than ours. So that alone is a reason to look at this and consider what we can do to give them a better head start as they move forward down towards their own careers. But additionally, I was going to add, I know that one of the things that we did here, we did try to take a look at what would happen, what would it cost if everybody could be at that front door at 8 o'clock or 8:30, whatever we thought the right time was. What did you come up with a number for that?
Well, looking at some numbers, it was what we tried to do was consider what would it look like if we could do 2 tiers. is really what we were trying to look at. And in order, I think we're somewhere between 90 and 100 buses per tier on a run. And so if you think about that, you're going to talk about if everybody went at once, somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 buses on the road. So if you can do 2 tiers, you split that in half. So what we're talking about doing is 150 buses or so on the road at a time. And so if you think about 50 buses, which Will would need to add to his fleet to do a 2-tiered route, the bus cost alone is about $3.8 million just for the buses. So your first year total for drivers, buses, yearly fuel maintenance, about $5.5 million for a startup cost to do that, to move to 2 tiers. And then also an additional yearly of around $1.7 million to keep that up annually. So, and that's just a first year. That's not to mention the cost of replacement buses down the road, and that's also not to mention the extra possible mechanic and, oh yeah, a bus lot to put those buses on too. So those things would be...
No thanks.
Connie, can you do some quick math and convert how many million again? 5 point?
Well, $5.5 million for the startup cost, and then 1.7 each year after.
1.7 fixed. Can you convert that into FTE of teachers? I don't ask for much.
That's taking a lot away from a classroom.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Will, can you tell us how it was decided what schools are on what tier? Between the elementary schools, please.
I could take a stab.
Here, take a stab.
No, hang here and correct me if I'm wrong. I did a lot of Bus 101 with Will, so I want to try to. I was curious and confident about buses.
Now you're capable.
But I do know that.
Have you ever driven one?
No, I haven't. I used to get in the back to bounce a little bit. But I think what we were looking at originally, Piermont had a Mosaics program. And it would be more beneficial to have them at the earlier starting time. And then when you think about where Oak Brook, Sorrento, and Hanna are located, and also the number of buses to even out the tiers is certainly a consideration. But it's also, if you think the next route those buses have to go on are going to be to the south, to South Middle School. So you need more buses in one area to make it more efficient. Green Trails had some other considerations, I believe, with our ESOL population, which is coming from various parts of the district. And then that's how the remainder schools ended up in the last tier as a matter of balancing the routing. So, go on.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly right. You know, some of the schools in the south are the farthest from where we're leaving, so we need to get down there. We need more time in the morning when there's nothing before it. For instance, for Oak Brook, it's all the way down the south quadrant. And then there's 2 feeder schools, southwest and south middle. So again, we need to have resources down there to, without driving back and forth across the district. The bus is already down there, and it does balance them out too when we do it. So.
What about Hanna? Explain what happened with Hanna, and I mean, I think there were some valid points brought up about the safety of those kids being released at the same time that South.
Yeah, you know, that's been a concern prior to this because they're very similar right now. I think there's a 5-minute difference between release time on Hanna and that. So I don't know if there could be an adjustment made there. I know the original move when we reevaluated the system, it was really looking at that efficient run of having 6 additional bus runs down in that south area to make a more, because this is what happened in the going back and forth and trying to negotiate and close the gap to get an ending time that was more suitable for folks. Will was trying to condense the routing in between, and so it would be more efficient to have a shorter route in the end of the day to have those buses already in that area. So that's why the last move was made.
When you talk about the more flexible nature of elementary students, it causes me to think we've gotten a lot of correspondence in the last month or two. I'd say probably at least 300 emails, and many of them are for the changes, many of them are against the changes, many of them want to have their kids start earlier, many want to have their school start later. And we're always trying to look at what's going to benefit kids the most, and somebody said along the way that the elementary school kids are the most flexible. And I know we currently have some 7:45 start times and we have some 9 a.m. start times. So my question is there any achievement data that would compare the start times of our early starting elementary schools with the data of our later start times? Is there any indicator that those times can impact student achievement?
To my knowledge, we don't have the data collected, and I don't know. Are you talking about our current schools that maybe start earlier?
Piermont's achievement, can we compare it to Shenandoah, and can we draw any conclusions that an earlier start time or a later start time might impact achievement?
I think we could probably have the data, but I don't think that we could draw any conclusive evidence that that correlation, statistical correlation was occurring because of the start and end
Which
times.
goes along with the research that you've cited all along, saying there is no conclusive research about achievement in elementary students, whether it's earlier or later start times.
So no, there's been no national research to be able to show that one or the other. I do want to point out also that if you think about where the middle schools are in the middle of this proposal, it also shifts that big jump. Right now, a lot of our kids are going from 5th grade with a 9 o'clock start and jumping all the way up next year and with a 7:20 start or 7:25 start. So in order to try to keep those middle schools in the middle, there's also a lot less angst in that transition period from year to year, from the 5th to 6th grade year. And I think I'll ask our elementary folks to think about when their children are going to be in elementary school or in middle school, what that will mean to them. Those are some of the biggest, I would say, some of the biggest years for kids in development as far as health, as far as impression, and also the stakes get a little higher for them. At this point, when you're just talking about, and I'll talk about it in terms of probably over 400 interviews I've served with kids that ended up at our alternative high school who over almost 90% of those interviews ended up with the kids talking about their middle school experience not being as successful, and they knew then that the school wasn't working for them. And a lot of times when I would speak with those parents, it would say, I just can't get him out of bed to get to middle school. And I can understand why when you're fighting with your 12 and 13-year-old at 6 in the morning.
Just one more point. I think it's a lucky bonus, the point that you brought up about the high schools that generally have to release early, their 9th and 10th graders, their freshmen and JV sports participants to get to contests outside of the district. I know that it can really negatively impact student achievement if you have a sports team, for instance, that plays every Monday at 4 o'clock, and in order to get to their away games, they have to leave their last hour class 20 to 30 minutes early. So with an earlier start time, we'll have an earlier end time, and our students won't be sacrificing perhaps 20 minutes of English once a week, which is huge. And I think that we didn't really consider that going into changing the elementary start or the high school start times by 15 minutes, but I think that could really potentially have a big impact on our students.
And our schools the high schools have really tried to not do that as often as possible, but certainly it does still occur at times. So.
In some of the emails we received, there were some accusations made that board members had agendas and that the interim superintendent had an agenda. And I'd like to ask Jason and Nan if you wouldn't mind coming up, because I'm sorry, Nan, but you two led this task force through Project Parkway. You've been on the steering committee for over 2 years, or however long it's been. Seems like 10, but from your perspective, did anyone pressure you? Did this come from any pressure? How did this come about? I mean, what?
No, I would say there wasn't any pressure, but not by the board or anyone else. We had a great task force made up of parents, administrators at both elementary and secondary. Teachers were involved. I'm personally a support staff member for the school district, and Nan obviously as a parent. And we stressed, one of the things we stressed in our task force meetings, I think we met almost on a weekly basis. In both, we would alternate mornings and nights just so we could accommodate everyone's schedule and got got everyone's opinions and research and information. I think everyone.
We were information gathering rather than a recommendation.
Yeah.
That was clear.
So we established that as kind of a norm that we need to pull back our personal biases, and really we're just focusing on providing the research we think the board needs to make this type of decision. And there were times we would get caught up. You drop that pebble in the water and you start seeing the ripples and you start thinking, well, we could do this and move this here and move that there. And we would have to pull ourselves back and say, what's the best research we can provide in the time that we have available to the board to make this type of decision.
I personally didn't see any hidden agenda from anyone.
And I know when the task force leaders were set up, the board wanted people like you who were unrelated to the issue to lead the effort to study it so that we wouldn't have problems later on with someone trying to push an agenda through. And Nan's a parent, a very active parent in the district, and Jason is he works in the technology department. So I really appreciate you stepping up because I just think that point.
Certainly from the start of Project Parkway and conversations I had with Dr. Wiggins very early on, and going directly to the issue of agenda-driven subcommittees. And I'm not so naive to think that it can't happen in Parkway. But I think the multiple layers and the task force approach, where the original committee, which probably attracted those with an agenda, if there was one out there, those have been leavened through a deliberate process to bring in perspectives like yours. And I think a recent process that the board utilized in our superintendent search, very deliberate, controls built into the process, no predetermination of outcomes, and I'm just a firm believer in if you apply the controls, use the process to the absolute best of our ability, the talents and the skills that exist in the staff, administration, all of the Parkway employees. I think that's the key to how we can do the best thing for all of our children. And I want to thank you for the work. I know, and I have talked to some of your task force members directly who disagree with the final product, and I think that's absolutely fair. And I acknowledge, and I had an extensive conversation with Shelley Thomas Binky, and in the end we agreed to disagree, and at some point a decision has to be made, and we as board members are absolutely not the technical experts that can generate the best answer. And so again, the stress on process, not personality. I think the die is cast for Project Parkway. That process will continue long after any one of us is no longer on the board, long after the interim superintendent is doing something else, and certainly to the notion that we would use the interim superintendent for plausible deniability. And believe me, I'm familiar with the term. I was a Navy cryptologist for 22 years. I lived it. I don't have a personal agenda in this. Matter of fact, I got a third grader at Oak Brook who ain't too fast in the morning. So, but no, I do want to thank your fidelity to the process, and we appreciate the product. Thank you. Any other comments? Desi, thank you very much for the presentation, the hard work, making the connections. At this point, I'm going to ask for a motion and a second that the Board of Education approve the new start and ending times for schools beginning with the 2011-2012 school year as presented in the March 2nd, 2011 board material.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Mogerman? Mr. Applebaum? Ms. Feldman? Mr. Jacob? All right. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we will take a brief recess at this point. Thank you. Back on the agenda from our first deviation. So I'll need a motion and a second to approve the agenda for March 2nd, 2011.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Resolutions 8.0, we have National Read Across America Day, March 2nd. Today, National Nutrition Month. Excuse me, that was Freudian. School Breakfast Week, March 6th through 12. School Principals Day, March 2nd. Congratulations, any principals still in the building? Go home. National Professional Social Workers Month and Week, March 6th through 12. And Gifted Education Week, April 3 through 9. Along with School Library Media Month in April and Week of the Young Child, April 11 through 17. May I have a motion and a second to approve those resolutions?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Communications 9.01, introduction of Board of Education candidates in the order they appear on the ballot. Please rise when I say your name. D.A. Mogerman.
Thank you.
Bruce Major. Chris Jacob. And Patricia Adair. The election will be April 5th. Correct?
Yes.
Tuesday, April 5th. 9.02, calendar of meetings. The next regular meeting of the Board of Education is scheduled for Wednesday, April 13, 2011, at Central Middle School, starting at 7 p.m. with the annual organizational meeting, followed by the 7:30 regular meeting, and we will be recognizing all Parkway students who will be going into the military at the beginning of that meeting, and I am certainly looking forward to that. 9.03, liaison reports. Mr. Jacob?
I know the night is getting late, but let me just say I had a delightful time going to the all-district fourth grade orchestra. I had the afternoon session, and it was, I'm sure, just as good as the morning, but you should have seen Bruce from Shenandoah with
Bruce Hunter
with his, I thought it was Jerry Lee Lewis.
I was looking for him to be standing on the keyboards.
He really enjoyed himself, and the kids had a great time. And if you have any kind of rhythm at all, your foot was occasionally moving up and down as you got in unison with the kids. It was a great time. Not too long after that, I had a chance to go down to South again to spend some time down there and tour the building and see some things. The food court. Since we remodeled that down there, I think it's kind of the envy of just about every school. It actually is like a food court in a mall, and very nicely done and presented. We went over and looked at the robotics area and some of the things they're doing there. There are some gifted students in there, and there's others that have interest in that are being helped by some of the ones that are really exceptional at it. That was very interesting, and finally we ended up in the culinary section where we had gingerbread pancakes. Just happened to get there just in time for that. So some nice things happening down there, and of course we were down there to look at the progress on the science wing that's being put on there, and quite a bit of progress. They were just getting ready to pour the floors. So great time, great progress.
Thank you. Ms. Feldman?
I had the opportunity to revisit the Early Childhood Center one day last week. I haven't been there since my own two children were small and went to parent-child interaction classes there, and it was really fun to see the little kids and see the early learning that goes on through all of the different ages, but specifically in the pre-K, in the 4-year-old room, to see the early reading and understanding of letters. I thought it was really fascinating. So I enjoyed that. I also got a chance to see Dirty Rotten Scoundrels last week, musical put on by Central High. It's amazing how much talent we have in our schools. And we had our government relations meeting last week, and Dee will probably want to talk about that.
Nice segue, ladies. You don't need me here, do you?
Yes, we had a very well-attended government relations meeting. And then the following day, we had, Mr. Jacob and I went to the Cooperating School District's legislative breakfast with Dr. Senni and Diana Stewart in West Garten. A lot of interesting topics, a lot of school finance concerns. What else did we talk about in government relations?
Well, we heard from several of our legislators. We have a getting to know you kind of thing. And we had a newly elected
Maryland Heights.
Mary
Nichols.
Thank you. And
Senator. Thank you. Eric Schmidt.
Eric Schmidt, right. There you go.
And
as well as Dr. Yurkovich from Cooperating School Districts, telling us a lot about the legislation that's before the state legislature in Jefferson City. That it
Turner, and
impacts
we
us.
talked a lot about the Turner v. Clayton suit, which we also talked about at the breakfast the next day. I also attended the PTO leadership meeting a couple weeks ago, and we had a long discussion on start times that was very helpful and productive, I think. So I think that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Applebaum?
I attended MSBA certification training for school board members. And,
now we'll teach you the secret handshake.
It was outstate, and I, for one, I've always appreciated Parkway, but I really appreciate Parkway now, as everybody in here should. And I also appreciate the dynamic of the board and how well we are able to work together, because I saw a different view of education out there, and part of the issue had to do with finance and talking about school financing, and that was definitely the other side of the coin with most of the districts that I was attending training with. So,
okay,
very educational.
Thank you. Well, I could go on and on about school visits, but I won't, given the constraints of time. But I did want to mention a couple events in particular. Is the date on here, Jawanda? Whenever that was, it's all a blur. But we did join the Missouri NEA, and at their legislative forum, Otto Fajan talked extensively on current items of interest, and that was absolutely a delightful evening and very educational. The food was good. That's always important. That's the paycheck on the school board. But the information and perspective was invaluable. Thank you very much for that invitation. Chris and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And then right after that, same night, we, after having visited Hannah Woods, we tail end of A Taste of Hannah, which was the was that the assistant principal's brainchild?
Yeah, I think it was Lisa.
I think Lisa Thompson did most of and she's got the permanent souvenir from it. She had a henna tattoo that evidently she had an allergic reaction to, so she's got a permanent souvenir of the night.
Oh no.
Well, you know, you got to expect a certain amount of collateral damage when you're. But the food was unbelievably good. I won't say better than what the NEA had, but it was darn good. And then also a lot of cultural exchange going on. I think I saw the future for the district of an evening at a school, and I liked it. So.
They said it was the most parents that they'd ever had at the school for one function, other than maybe a grade graduation. It's very.
Chris and I got there after 7:30, and the event was supposed to run from 5 to 7 or 8. It was still standing room only when we got there. So. All right, 10.0 action items, which includes a item, I believe, on Old Farm Estates, for those paying attention. So with the addition of the added items, 10.23, 10.24, may I have a motion and a second to approve the consent items?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or items that should be pulled to action or closed?
Mr. President, I just have one that I would like us to pull to action. It's 10.05D.
10.05D, Logic Blast?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. Any others? And I will need to abstain from item 10.02, the second attachment, which is the rehiring of teachers for 2011-2012 school year. Page 15, I believe there's a line item that starts with MAJOR. I am abstaining publicly, loudly, and repeatedly from having anything to do with that line item. So.
We're going to hire her anyway.
I also have that same, not that same number on the line, but that same item that I have to abstain from, and I'll let you know later which line.
Okay. Anything else for action or closed? All right. With that said, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Now, before we get to action items, I'm going to call 10.05 Delta, Logic Blast, Inc., and Liz Morrison will be addressing that issue for us.
It's not, Liz, that I have, that I'm against it, but I just feel like this was something that we thought was going to be part of Munis, and I would like to see us maybe table this for a month so that we could have that study looked at and tell us what's wrong with Munis, or can we put the hooks?
I have it done. I can present that to you if you'd like.
Okay.
Good answer.
I mean, you put me in front of a microphone. I mean, really.
We're in trouble.
Oh, okay. The timeline is important because we need to have, for the the new teacher development and evaluation model, we need to have it ready to roll in June. So the timeline is very important for moving it forward. And let's see. Thanks. And Dan Tripp put together the PowerPoint, and I'm going to skip to the part that you would like to see, I think, that's comparing Munis to, we compared it to a bunch of different plans that were out there as far as what we needed for professional development. And when Munis was originally purchased, it was purchased for a financial program and for human resources. And I guess we found out just a couple months ago that it had the professional development piece. So as soon as we knew that that was available, my department worked with Wes and the technology department to compare the two pieces. Okay. So let's see if I can scroll down here. We don't want to look at any of the non-pertinent slides, so we'll go here. I think starting here. Okay. So we started by looking at what did the systems have and some of the things that we needed. So, this is not very good. Oh, let me go to.
Can you go full screen on that
Yeah,
for the
sorry
class
about that.
of 81?
Slideshow. Yeah, do you think? Okay, so we started looking at what we needed the system to do from the professional development side. One of the key pieces that we have are, and we looked at comparing it, but the reason why we selected My Learning Plan is the middle piece. We also looked at a program called PD360. My Learning Plan is used by other districts across the state. Peers is the one that's kind of made by Parkway, and then a PD360 was so goodbye, cool. So looking at Munis, comparing it to My Learning Plan and Peers, My Learning Plan, if you notice, is probably the one that had the most of the pieces in place, but the financial impact of My Learning Plan was not okay. The startup plan for My Learning Plan was like $2,500. That sounds great. Every year it would run between $60,000 to $100,000 because of the people that we have in our district. So it's like they kind of reel you in with a low start price, and then it's huge expense. So with Peers, it was a relatively, it seems higher as far as the startup price goes at $23,000, but then yearly, our original estimate was $12,000, but it's really only going to be yearly $4,000 for everybody in the district. So much better plan. The question about Munis was Munis didn't do what we needed it to do for the professional development side. It does a good job of tracking, but we need to be able to propose courses. We need to be able to score those courses. We need them to get back and turn them around quickly.
We need a system that when we have something that changes, that we need to be able to fix it, and Peers is able to do that for us. What people didn't like about Peers is it wasn't very pretty, and it was hard to run through the programs. We're changing it to Peers 2.0. The interface is going to be beautiful, easy to use, and we've been working with Sharon Hennessy and Aline from our technology department to make sure that Peers and Munis will be able to talk. Did that answer your question or just bring up more questions?
No, it answers it. Give her a microphone, we're in trouble.
Well, I guess,
Yeah, we can delay, certainly.
But we're on that timeline. We would like to do the development with our administrators with the new teacher development model in June. And it's Logic Glass, a small company that helps us with Peers. And so to get that done, if we put us off from that June 2-day development. So,
now, wasn't one of the constraints of Peers was it's difficult to generate different reports if you want to see data in a different way?
And that is part of the redesign, that we were able to pull reports from Peers. So when she said Peers 2.0,
that addresses more than just the pretty graphics.
Yes.
Enhanced functionality.
Right, absolutely. And if you look up here, you guys, the evaluation management was a key piece that we needed to have included in the new model because it ties indirectly to the teacher development evaluation model. And my learning plan had all of those features in it. Munis had none of those features except that it was web-based. Peers didn't have them either. But in the price that we got from Logic Blast, we're able to add all of those features to be exactly what we want. So we can say, here is the Parkway teacher evaluation model. Here's what it needs to do for our administrators and for our teachers. And we'll be able to put all of those in the price point that we were looking at to make this happen for our school district.
So that's a fixed bid? It's not a...
Yes, it's a fixed bid.
And the teacher development will be electronic. So that's new as well.
Yeah, and
what's your time frame for having this functional?
It should be functional by our go date for the evaluation management plan is for the May 31st development for our administrators. So we've been working on it with Steve's team and our team from staff development to make sure that we can make these systems talk, and then also with Logic. But we haven't really, Logic Glass we're waiting for tonight, hoping that we would get a yes so we could move forward.
Excellent.
And we can send this PowerPoint.
Yeah, absolutely.
That gives more data. Okay?
Mr. Jacob? Oh.
Wes has
no more questions.
The other thing is, the module for Munis, I'm pretty sure from for what we're talking about, I think that we get a credit on that if we don't use it too. We can actually, if we don't use it. So let me check on that also, just to help you. I know that it wasn't much. I think it was, to use it was like $6,000 or $7,000 out of the total package. But I think if we don't use it, we can get a credit for it. So, okay.
Thank you.
I'll check on it.
Thanks, Wes.
All right. Do I hear a motion regarding item 10.05 Delta?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. It is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we get a drum roll? Is there a soundtrack for this? 12.0 reports. 12.01, we've all been waiting for it. Evaluation Transportation Program. Call on Will Rosa, Director of Transportation, and 1980. What year did you graduate, Will? 1979 state champion. Let's get ready to rumble.
I think we're going to have to take the microphone away from Mr. President.
It's after 10. I got liberties.
It was undefeated, too.
Does this start out with a video?
I wanted to. I've got some videos. Maybe next time. we had more time, I've got some good ones, good bus videos.
Should we get our popcorn out?
No. All right. Stuff here. Well, that's cool. Good evening, President Majors, Vice President Jacobs, board members, Dr. Sinti, Ms. Kalanda. I'm here tonight to talk about transportation. I was here, as you remember, back in November as we started a program evaluation, so I'd like to finish up with that this evening, and I have some information. I did, for the questions, I hope everybody has a copy of the answers on the written questions, and we can discuss any of those if you'd like to.
Thank you.
And I will go. You know, school buses, as you see in my first slide, they've really evolved from the horse and carriage all the way to the Parkway school bus in the bottom left corner. I have a picture of my kids even riding the bus there, which they didn't like that. School buses have evolved. Parkway has evolved along with school buses, as we saw tonight with the vote earlier, to meet changing needs of the community. I think we do a lot of the right things at Parkway. There's new emission standards with buses and transportation. There's safety standards that change. There's alternative fuels that I'll talk about. There's also some tracking and GPS functions that we can use in transportation.
And variable beepers for all.
And variable beepers, right? So this evening, I'd like to talk about some of the key performance measurements in the transportation department. We have the 4 categories that I'm going to go through: drivers, surveys, vehicles, and the efficiency of our department. Let's see. The first one, in the category of drivers, that we measure our accident statistics that we keep a very close look at. And nobody likes to talk about accidents, but it wouldn't be a bus presentation if I didn't bring them up. Our goal is always 0, of course. We compare very favorably to all other school districts in the area and in the state. School buses are still 9 times safer than any car, any time. And I put in the bottom right corner the years with no accident. We have drivers in the 5 to 10 year range. There's 59 of them that have not had an accident in 5 to 10 years. 11 to 15 years, there's 11 drivers, and so on. So we've got a pretty impressive workforce and very safe workforce. And if you look at the bar chart to the right, you can see we've been trending down a little bit into 2009-10. We're under 20 accidents. And when I count an accident, I count everything. You know, if two mirrors bump in a parking lot, that's an accident. So, you know, our criteria is pretty strict, and so those are included in those numbers.
Anybody injured in an accident this year?
No, we've not had any injuries. And I put backing accidents up there because that's always a concern for me. And we have backed into a few mailboxes, but we're improving, and there are some technologies out there that we're going to look at trying in terms of changing some of those numbers. Most of the backing are on our own parking lot. We've got very tight spaces. Oops, I go too far. The other category in drivers that we measure are our DESI training requirements, which all of our drivers have to have 8 hours of training. I know in part of the survey results, you know, do you train your drivers? How much do you train them? We train them a lot. And it's 8 hours every year. A lot of it's refresher. We talk about loading, unloading, the danger zones. We talk about the key components, our Smith system, safety driving. So we do continuous and ongoing training of our drivers. The other area, random drug testing and alcohol testing. We do that every month. It's a very important part for a safety-sensitive person like someone with a commercial driver's license, and someone that tests positive wouldn't be driving for Parkway. Emergency evacuations is another. We do that every spring and fall because if they're in an event, unlikely event, something happening on the bus, we need to be able to get the children off quickly. So we do practice it, and when we do field trips, the driver announces, just like someone on like they do on an airplane, you know, here are your emergency exits, and they go through the routine to remind everybody. Efficiency, we're always looking at ways to improve our efficiency and use our resources in a better manner. Here are our load averages. And there were some questions about loading and crowding in our survey that we took from parents and administrators and everybody. And I know we had some responses about crowding, not a big number, but I would like to address it. Crowding is a hard number to pin down. And here's what we're loading on an elementary bus. We have 42 students, middle school average of 40, so on and so forth. High school at 38, ESL loads, which are district-wide, are 11. The Pace Reach, which are district-wide, are 9. Mosaic, district-wide, are 5. We buy 65 passenger buses as the maximum capacity, and that's an ideal number, obviously, and that's calculated at 3 to a seat for 22 seats, and the one seat has 2 in the back. And we obviously, you can't put 3 kids, high school or middle school kids, in a seat with book bags and instruments. So our target capacity at Parkway is 50, and even our highest number of 42 is about 84% of that. And that would be 16 seats with 2 to a seat and 6 seats with 3 students to a seat, which is reasonable, and that's not for the entire ride because kids are getting off as they're driving. So we think that's reasonable. When we do get some overcrowded where there's children are unsafe or uncomfortable, we would split the route, and we have done that this year on several occasions. We do try and react appropriately when we have some issues.
Hey, Will?
Yes, sir?
Are those numbers based on what you get at the beginning of the year when people say, I want my child to go on the bus, and then maybe they don't? Or are these actual numbers that are looked at periodically?
We do a student count in the fall, in October, and then we do one in February. We just did another one in February, and we count every student that rides the bus, and then we take those numbers, and then I factor them through that way. Our student count actually is going up. It's been trending up for the last few years. We're at 10,900 students that ride the bus. So it's actual counts. But that's a good point. Are some kids not riding because they feel it's overcrowded? That could be possible. Well, this next slide is a PowerPoint violation. I know that, but it's up there anyway. I guess it's kind of a moot point. This is our current tiering system. When we talked about how many tiers do we have and how many starting times, we're all over the place. This is this year's current tiering. And you can see, we have 2 school routes where there's just like Central, Middle, and a Bellerive, and there's a couple up there, even a 1-school tier. So we've really, the 3-tier system really takes this and streamlines it and makes it better for everybody, I think. The length of the bus ride was a survey question, and we did talk about it. Our length of bus ride is between 10 and 40 minutes. And I can tell you, I broke that down a little bit further earlier today. And if you look at the average ride times for elementary school, they're right at about 21.5 minutes. Middle school is about 24 minutes, and high school would be approximately 16 pickups. And so all of them are really under 30 minutes on an average. So some are longer, some could be 40 minutes. I mean, we do have some longer routes, and we have to. There's no way around that. But we do have some pretty quick routes where kids are on the bus and off pretty quickly, particularly at the elementary school level. They don't ride nearly as long. The average walk distance now, we did survey that. In the survey we sent to parents and administrators and staff and everyone else. And amazingly, I didn't realize it was even this at these levels. Our elementary school students walk less than 0.10 of a mile, which is not 4 houses maybe. It's not very far. Middle school at 0.20 and high school at 0.25. We didn't get very many really complaints about our walk distance in general. I think it was and you can see why. They're pretty decent. And those will continue. We wouldn't be changing those for next year. The stops are already established.
I think one of your further slides talks about what our policy limits are.
Right.
Is that
Well,
something that needs to be looked at in view of current realities, or?
It could, in some cases, our elementary schools are half a mile walk distance, and the middle school's a mile. Some of them, there's hazardous areas that even though they're within the range, we have to provide transportation because they can't cross, like Woods Mill, for instance, and there's some other Clayton, there's some other roads we can't cross. Hannah was one. I know we talked about Hannah earlier, and the number of children that are walking and they're dismissing at the same time as South High. I don't believe there's a lot of students that are in the area to walk. I think it's a pretty small number that actually walk to Hannah.
Would that, way off topic, would that be a potential fix for Hannah? Is just
it
start
could be.
including them?
We could include them. You know, you could look at an adjustment. I'm going to see how many students it's going to be affecting. We're doing it now with South High. South High gets out about the same time, and there are a lot of high school students that are driving. You know, I've got a daughter that goes there, and she's getting ready to drive. So I certainly understand what the parents' concerns are there.
Okay.
Another area we measure pretty closely in our department is the vehicles. There we go. You know, we measure the number of breakdowns, and these are breakdowns on the road, not in our parking lot. And you know, in the last 2 years, we're at 70 and 71 breakdowns, which sounds like a high number, but you know, I would say this, you know, if there's 174 days at 115 buses, I'm just looking at the regular ed buses, that's all I'm measuring right here. So you have 115 buses, 174 days, 2 or 3 times a day, and I calculated it's roughly about 45,000 opportunities for a bus to break down every time they're out. So we're less than 1/10 of 1%. So I think it's pretty decent. I've worked other places where it's a lot higher. So. And you don't see very many Parkway buses on the side of the road, but we do measure it just to make sure we're where we need to be on our maintenance. The other thing is our maintenance, cost of maintenance per vehicle. I do look at that, and we are within the range. It's important. Thank you.
The delta is negative. Well done.
Yes. Well, we're right in the range for our industry average, which is anywhere from 3,000 on the low end to 6,500 on the high end. And I look at I try and keep up on our industry to see where we're maintaining our maintenance, which is pretty decent. As you know, we do the annual Missouri Department of Transportation bus inspections. Last year was our 20th year at 90% first pass on a bus inspection rate. I think we're the only bus fleet in the state of Missouri of 100 plus buses that has had 20 consecutive years of 90 plus. So we've done and Fred Matlack is the maintenance manager, and most of you guys know him. He's done an incredible job. So this year will be 21. And last year we were one of the very few districts in the area that's serviced by Troop C, because Troop C had kind of a very stringent year last year, and they were not very nice. We were one of the only few districts that scored above 90 last year. Their numbers went way down. So in terms of average age of fleet, as you know, we have just the premier fleet on the road. It's safe, reliable. And you can see and we get good trade-in values, which helps us when we purchase new buses, when we keep our fleet new and young. Vehicle maintained by our technicians, we're at 26.8 buses per technician. The industry average is anywhere from 18 to 30, so we're right in the range. And I'm not counting the white fleet, just purely the buses. So we're right where we need to be in terms of our maintenance costs. This was an add-in slide, because we're going to talk about some alternative fuels. I just wanted to show you, and I know that's kind of a small print there, but since the beginning of the year, July, our fuel costs, diesel fuel has been on the rise. We started at $2.25 a gallon, and now we're up to over $3. I think our last purchase on the 27th was $3, $3.12, I think. So you can see, it's a good time to look at alternative fuels. I know we've been talking about compressed natural gas as one, and I've done some site visits, and in fact, we're going to have another site visit at Parkway next week to look at our shop and our property and look at what it would cost to do some modifications to further our, to pursue the compressed natural gas as an alternative, because it's a lot less expensive than $3 a gallon, assuming it stops at $3 a gallon. Our buses, people ask, I looked at 2009 and 10, our regular ed buses get 6.92 miles per gallon, which isn't that great for diesel. And if you looked at the special ed, the smaller vans, you think they get more. They're only 9.85. They're also fairly low in terms of miles per gallon. And overall, we're about 7.5 miles per gallon as a fleet, which is fairly typical for the type of buses that we operate. So the last area measurement that we're going to look at is our survey numbers, and I didn't, as you know, it's quite a packet, so I'm not going to go through the whole thing. There's a lot of interesting comments.
308 pages.
Yeah, 308, right. There's a lot of comments. Some of them are good, and some of them are, needs improvement, and we certainly take them all to heart. Overall, I think I'm very pleased with most of the results. I think it gives us some ideas of things we can work on. That, maybe we didn't realize they were concerns in some areas that we think we're doing all the right things on. I just picked a couple of them here that I thought were important. Reliability, because our mission statement for our department is on time, safe, reliable transportation. So in terms of reliability, most of our parents, 82% agree or strongly agree we've been fairly reliable. Administrators, 100%. So I got a lot of friends. Students, they appear to be the toughest critic out there. So maybe that'll change next year when they get to start a little bit later. That's probably middle school students. They don't like getting up early. Safe, again, 78.3% of parents feel we're safe. Administrators, 97. You can read the numbers, and 76 for students. I think our overall safety. There's always going to be some unsafe driving behaviors with any business that you're in, and we're constantly looking for it and trying to correct it. And if it becomes a pattern, then those individuals are driving somewhere else or not driving at all. And then the on time, parents 77 strongly agree that we're on time, and administrators 88. And again, the students are tough critics. They only 62.8. On time is kind of a squishy number because for some parents, some kids, students, some administrators, on time means we need to be at school 10 minutes before school, and some people think 10 minutes before is too early. So I don't know that we always have agreement on what on time means at each and every school. We try and do what's best talking to administrators and parents in schools to get the kids there with enough time to either have some breakfast or do whatever they need to do to get to the locker before school.
And the remaining percentages were not necessarily negative comments. Some of them could have been...
Right, or no comments.
No comment at all.
Right, yeah. In fact, that's more than usually the case. Our staff survey, the question, all things considered, how do you rate your satisfaction with the job in the Parkway Transportation Department? 93.7 said they were satisfied or very satisfied. I think that's important because...
You can't even get 10% of your employees to be unhappy with you.
I'm sure we
What
can.
are you doing wrong?
I'm sure we can. Employees like working here. Parkway's a great place to work, not only in transportation, but in the schools. Everybody's great to work with. Happy employees are better employees. We know that. They're better for the kids. They're smiling. They're interacting. They care about what they're doing, and they're vested in delivering to students safely every day. So I'm pleased to see that the employees recognize this is a great place to work. Again, I like this slide because we talk about Project Parkway and our mission and vision. I like to see that our staff, at least they think they know what we're doing in terms of our mission and vision, and they're connected. Again, I think that's important because their role is important. Getting this, our staff handling, talking to parents, talking to administrators, getting students to school on time and safely, interacting with students, making sure they're ready for school and they have a positive, safe experience on the bus every day. So I'm happy to see we're headed in the right direction, and we will get that to 100%. We'll keep working on that one. I just like this question. Students behave in the bus. I don't know if it means anything, but 75% of the respondents, administrators, agree or strongly agree. So administrators must know something about students. I don't know. And if you ask the next group, let's see who we got next here. Students, I love this. I behave in the bus. So 92% of them behave in the bus.
Everybody else.
And I thought, wow, that's a big number. And I only bring that up because they're in part of the survey. If you read some of the responses, well, X% say my kids are bullied or something bad's going on. Well, I don't know who's doing it all because there's 92% of them say they're good. And then if you look at the parents, imagine what they're going to be. Everyone's in denial. My child
Even
behaves
more
on the bus. 93%. Everybody's good on the bus. So I thought that was an interesting questions and responses. I don't know what the number is. My best guess is about 90%. I think most of our kids are good on the buses. They're not perfect. If it's something serious, we try and catch it. We don't like bullying on buses, I can tell you that. And that's, we've been talking about that in our district, and we're looking for ways in our own transportation department to eliminate that so kids feel like it's a safe and comfortable environment on a bus. So.
Now, Dr. Senti, I know Clayton did not have a benchmark number for that. Did your consortium have a...
Most of our consortium in Clayton didn't have buses.
Right. I knew Clayton didn't, but...
I did my own, there's some surveys in there about contracted services, and I know, Bruce, that was a question from you about what can we do and how does it work. And we do contract a lot of our athletic trips, and I'd like to see some, I put it in the response in the questions, about half of it for I think it was 140,000, something to that effect. And could we reduce that and do some more of it with our own school parkway drivers? And I think if, as we re-tier and we look to restructure our drivers and our workforce, maybe we could use some of those drivers in a different way and save some money and get better service and do a lot of the right things that we want to do. And so I did my own survey, phone survey with the athletic directors directly.
We're going to have to clear this with Dr. Tyson.
Well, I know. I had to tell him. It was my ad hoc survey. Yeah. But surprisingly, they all agree.
Are we regressing to the mean at this point?
Apparently, they all agree we should be using Parkway buses, and I would too, because the cost, and the other factors that I had mentioned. We don't do split trips like a contractor would, for instance. So.
This is about 12 standard deviations. To get to
Is
this.
that what they call it? Yeah. I just like it 100%. That might be. So that's, again, back to my original slide, we provide on-time service, reliability, and safety. That's really our mission, and that's what we stay focused on in transportation. So, and that'll continue next year, of course. So that's questions. Yes, sir.
With regard to the gifted Mosaic, the average size, we don't use a big bus for that, do we?
Well, the bus is not the big cost, really, whether it's a big or a small bus. We need the wages, all the things that go along with it, the fuel. The big bus and the little bus is not much difference in terms of operating. Insurance, fuel, they're all the same fixed costs. So.
But the average size that we're picking up is 5.
Oh, the average is 5. It's pretty low.
From their house, too.
Yes.
Are we looking into that?
That is, I think that is being looked at pretty closely. Anybody else? Yes.
At 4 a.m., when I couldn't sleep, I looked at your survey.
Oh, boy.
It kept me really interested.
They are interesting.
2 hours till my kids got up. Anyway, I had a couple of questions for you. What is a driver supposed to do when they notice that a kid is being bullied while they're driving?
It depends. They're supposed to stop it. The first line of defense is a verbal command. We have to remember at least 85% of the time the driver has to be looking forward. Right. And so I caution. We try and talk to our drivers and say we need to manage the students on the bus, but we can't be doing this, because if you're doing that a lot, you're going to have a rear-end accident. And I've seen it where they go up where bus behavior is bad, and drivers are doing that, and the rear end is the worst kind of accident in a bus for the car in front and even the bus. So our first line of defense is to, there's a microphone in every bus, is to engage the student with the microphone to stop acting bullying, if that's what, if it's hitting or verbal or whatever it is. They can always pull a bus over, and I encourage them to pull the bus over and talk to the students and try and get the students, in their seats, behaving correctly, and if they can't do that, to call us on the radio. We don't usually get to that third step, but we have. It's tough for the driver sometimes to manage the students. The best way is at the beginning of the school year, to set the ground rules, set the expectations, and then keep control of the bus. But that doesn't always happen, and some buses are worse than others. In general, I would say most of our buses, elementary school kids are pretty good. Middle school are our biggest challenge, and then high school, they don't do anything really. So I know I saw a lot of the bullying questions in there also, and I'm not sure the easy answer other than we need to do a better job at student management, and I think it starts with the schools and here. And that's a topic we covered last year, and we'll cover it again this year at our startup meeting. And whether we have a speaker, one of the invite someone from a middle school to come, a principal, and someone from the elementary school to talk at our startup and kind of say, here's some strategies on how to manage kids on a bus.
Does every bus now have a video camera?
Yes, yeah.
And do we randomly review the tapes, or only when there's a problem?
We do both. I mean, we'll randomly review a tape as part of an evaluation, because we can tell the speed of the bus. Is the bus driver being friendly? Are they smiling? Are they talking? We look at a lot of things when they're driving, and we get a lot of requests from schools. I mean, I don't know how many we get a day. We get
Can I add something?
quite a few.
When we first got the cameras years ago, the purpose wasn't for anyone to sit and look and to look for infractions. It was if something happened to go back and review them. And same with the cameras in the schools. So that's probably the philosophy you still.
We do, but I mean, we'll randomly look if someone says, well, if we get a call, well, so-and-so driver was going X amount, whatever the speed is, I can get on there and look and say, well, no, they weren't, or yes, they were. And it's pretty definitive. So we do look, but we get enough requests from schools that keeps us fairly busy, and then we put them on the website for the schools to look at themselves. They're a great tool.
So if you get a complaint from a parent, say an elementary parent, my child comes home and complains of being bullied on the bus.
Right.
Are you able to go back and look at your tape and say, you know what, we see a trend here. We're looking at the afternoon run and we see this bigger kid kind of picking on. I mean, can you do that?
You can identify. You can't hear everything. It depends on, we have a camera at the midpoint that takes it back and then the front. So depending on where they're sitting, you can hear what the students are saying, and you can see what the behavior is and watch. And schools are fairly proactive with this if we talk to them if they get a complaint. So they help us watch the tapes.
And your hard drives are good for, you said, a couple of weeks worth?
Yeah, about 2 weeks, or 80 gig or 120 gigabytes. So they're about almost 2 weeks before they play over themselves. So if someone calls us within 2 weeks, we can pull it up.
And then I noticed in the comments, a lot of people said my bus is late. Now, I understand the kids have to wait at the bus stop, and it's cold and it's dark, and nobody likes to do it, but it's a fact. But my question is, when the buses arrive at school, does anybody keep track of on time, or if a run is chronically late? Do you look at that and do you say we need to adjust this rate?
We would adjust the late if it's so late that it affects the school, and we would talk to the administrator and say, what do you think about this bus? And we've had those, and we'll split the bus if we have to do that. Or they'll say it's okay. We had an instance at River Bend that we were concerned about, and then we talked to the principal there, and she said, no, the bus is fine. Or we may adjust a route or take one stop off or 2 stops to get it in there a little bit sooner, getting late to school.
I know I've heard kids talk here about, I don't know if it's here, one of the schools, waiting for their afternoon bus to arrive, coming from another run from another school somewhere. So is that a chronic problem, or is that just an intermittent thing?
There's always going to be the last bus and the first bus. The middle schools, now next year, the difference would be all the high schools will be leaving right on time because all those buses will be lined up. They'll be the first tier, plus the 4 elementary schools we had, and then the middle schools will be the second tier, and we'll have to work through that process of lining up the buses, because that's the most number of students that ride our middle schools. But generally, our tiering system builds in 5 to 10 minutes now as a buffer for traffic and weather or whatever, so we can get into schools on time. We don't want students waiting, and we don't want to be all the buses being dismissed and then one's pulling in. When we get to that point, then we start adjusting all of the buses and redistributing the students.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, Will, I just want to reiterate what I think I recall saying at the preview to this whole process, and that's that your organization is functioning at an extraordinary level. When the entire district is on par with transportation, we will really have something. So thank you.
Thank you.
13.0 work session, 13.01 attendance area update. Desi Kirchhoffer. He's back.
It's like Keystone Cops up here. We have some technical difficulties. Board members, I believe you have the PowerPoint on your laptop, so I'm going to walk you through it. They were telling me they've had some problems in the back, and so they're not able to get the presentation up. So, Will broke it. We're going to put that on his evaluation. Transportation. Thank you, Will.
Just jealous. Just jealous.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not seeing it either.
Oh, you don't have one either. Well, I'll just walk you through it. I'll give you an update and this will make it
Plausible
exciting.
deniability, eh?
So, picture that big Project Parkway task force thing up there, designing the future. Then I'll make a reference to that because there's another Project Parkway initiative that continues to move forward, and it's. I want to give you an update tonight on the attendance areas that we've been looking at, especially with concern to the overcrowding in the north area. So as you know, there was an original task force put together that did a needs assessment, and the discovery out of there was an immediate need to look into the north area, specifically our elementary schools at this time, but we also know that down the long term that those kids that are in those schools will move up through the middle and high school. So we need to think long term about solutions to address possible overcrowding middle and high High school's at a tough, critical point right now as the teachers are sharing rooms, and so the space there is a premium as well. But the Board of Education then looked for a task force this fall to quote unquote fix the overcrowding in the north area. Some of those task force recommendations included considering a kindergarten center, and that one was when it was suggested that we might move kids from two of the elementary schools to River Bend for their kindergarten year for just a short time. Other considerations were attendance area adjustments, perhaps long-term renovating ISC as an elementary school building, and then that task force continued to say we need to continue and review the entire district as we go through this process. When we revisited the issue and when the full-day kindergarten study was continued, the elementary building response was that they could manage for one more year if they knew some long-term solutions were coming in 2012. So remember that anything I referenced tonight is really talking about things for the 2012 school year, not the 2011 school year. Again, a steering committee recommended that another committee merge, and one of the proposals you saw forward tonight came out of the Connections Committee. The Connections Committee also discussed possible options to address some of the overcrowded in our schools. The committee feedback, while they thought some of the other options were or had potential, among those renovating the ISC building as a possible elementary site, they did think that the first attempt should be to look at adjusting attendance areas. That would be the most responsible and efficient way as a possible solution. So that recommendation went to Superintendent's Council for consideration. At that point, we thought it would be good to get some of the north area principals together, along with some of the central area principals that may be affected in any such change, and also to get their feedback on what they might be hearing from their communities. So in February, early February, we met with the north area. When I say we, I facilitated a meeting with the north area principals, 3 of the central area principals, Director of Communications, Director of Transportation was there, both Assistant Superintendent Dr. Maxey was there, and Dr. Senti was there for part of our meeting. What we did is we reviewed the task force reports again and went through, again, some of the timelines, some of the process we used to get to this point. But if I could get to the summary of that meeting, in conclusion, in our open discussion, everyone was able to share out. And that North Central area meeting really supported the recommendations of the Connection Task Force by agreeing that redrawing the attendance boundaries to move students, to possibly move students from the north area to central area should be one of the first options considered. They also felt the situation needed to be closely monitored over the next several years as enrollment was projected to continue to increase in the north area. The meeting attendees also believed it would be important to keep the ISC building as a potential future option if the upward enrollment trend continues. They also, we're good now? I'm almost finished. Let's just keep rolling, huh? Seconded the sentiments of the original task force on the Connections Task Force by agreeing that a comprehensive look at the district should be considered as they change the north and central areas. So essentially, even after after reviewing the steering committee reports, the task force reports, the Connections recommendations, the north area principals and central folks that were in that meeting agreed that that's probably the best route to go at this point. So our recommendation at this time, and we are in the process right now of working with Versatrans. You talked about our transportation and routing system. Versatrans is the company that currently provides our software to run our routes, so they have a lot of our data now. So we're working with them in this sense that we're providing them more data and answering questions as they correspond really with Will and I. One of their representatives has been emailing back and forth, and we've sent them data as they've asked for it. So what those consultants are doing is through March or during March, they're working on possible recommendations or possible solutions that they see as kind of an unbiased opinion. And so what they'll do then is for March and April then is bringing those back to us. So I can get leaders from the Connections Task Force back together and that group of principals and administrators back together to start, because they know their neighborhood. So we want their input when they come back with some of their recommendations. And so it'll be sort of a working session where our principals and us, we will be able to interact with the software consultants and say, well, what if you took this area and what happens if you move that many students, and they'll be able to play out some scenarios for us. But ultimately, we'd like to work that through April, and possibly May if needed, but eventually this spring we'd like to bring that forward for any of the schools that may be impacted by potential changes in 2012. We want to take that to those school communities. So we want to roll out a communication plan to be able to, this spring, summer, and perhaps into the fall if need be, to continue the dialogue and collaborate with the consultants, collaborate with the schools and the community so we have an ongoing feedback, and so there's also an ongoing knowledge base of why we're doing what we're doing. So while the consultants are heavy into it right now, I think we still have a long way to go. There's still a long process that needs to take place, and we need a lot of the communities and the schools that will be impacted most to be involved in the process. And if all goes well, we'll continue to work with the consultants into the future, too, as well as they can maybe help us clean up some of our other areas and other places that maybe could use some balancing out of enrollments as well. But I think the key thing to remember is, anything changes that will be recommended, they won't be until the start of the 2012 school year. And that's kind of where we are in the process right now. So.
Now, our existing policy regarding those types of changes has some specific timelines and procedures.
Yeah, it really.
Have you reviewed that document, and is that an adequate tool in Parkway in 2011?
There really could be a clearer process established. Now, what we did do on one of the task force back in the fall was review those guidelines, and everybody really did think they were pretty good guiding principles. Nobody knew which one took a priority over the other one. It seemed to make a difference if it impacted your kid, whether it was a priority or not, or which area it was. So that was kind of how the priorities laid out, whether it meant something to that person But otherwise, they did think they were pretty good guidelines as far as picking. And when I'm talking about the guidelines, they would talk about trying to keep neighborhoods together, trying to establish a feeder program. So they really were common sense things that most people would like to do.
Guiding principles.
They really were. They were good. As far as the policy itself goes, it's a pretty brief statement that basically says that, if you're going to do some changes, the superintendent needs to notify people at least 30 days in advance. But they should be reviewed periodically. Those guidelines, though, those 9 bullets, well, they're listed 9, but there wasn't a consensus that, like I said, that there was an order of importance to which one. But we did share that with the consultants, too, so they have what our current guidelines are, what our principles would be as well.
Okay. Well, I guess I was speaking earlier about process, and I guess I'd really like to have that policy looked at with a hard eye, and I think maybe Dr. Marty might have some constructive input. But I think getting that tool in place early, obviously you don't want to change the rules in the middle of the game, but I think leave no stone unturned in making sure our process is everything it should be.
Certainly.
Desi, when you all look at the way we're growing, especially in the north area, at what point do we really then start to impact the capacity that we have in the north area?
I think we're there, especially in the elementary right now. I think we're really at capacity. Probably beyond in a couple of our schools.
We read something about the possibility of not a trailer, what's it called? A modular at Craig next year, possibly.
I think we're going to be able to figure out something besides that. They're really too
expensive. The fact that
expensive.
they're even looking at it tells us
that there's a need, certainly.
Speaks volumes.
Yeah. And I just want to say out loud to my fellow board members, we thought tonight was a difficult issue. A year from now, what is your timeline? When do you think we need to?
Well, I think as far as
when do you think you'll be ready to make the recommendation, and when do you think we need to make the recommendation?
Well, I think it's important to do it as soon as we can if we're going to make these moves. I think we need to look at what the consultants bring for us to do. But ultimately, I would say that what we would like to have before the end of the year, that at least the big idea concept is attendance area changes are going to happen. And we've got 3 or 4 scenarios that we're looking for. So just know, and then we start bringing those to the school. And then I would expect that summer work and then an announcement in the fall for certainly, so people would have a lot of time to sit with it and learn from it and make adjustments as needed. So I would say the fall of next year.
I imagine we'll see a lot of meetings with parents and so forth. And I know we have forewarned Dr. Marty that this is an issue we're going to be dealing with next year, and he's ready to
Don't
tackle
you think
it.
that planning backwards, they'll need to make a decision about November?
I think so, just so people can make their adjustments that they're going to need to do. And
that's after all the hearings and looking at the alternatives and so forth.
Yeah.
Even as early as we think about that, this Friday we have a Paul Tandy communications meeting, and we're going to meet with some of his folks and talk about what communications and planning would look like for this process. So we're going to get some advisement from his group.
Sortino will be a resource, even though he's not here tonight, because he went through this before in this district.
We really need to do the awareness raising this spring yet, so people can't say next fall that they didn't even know it was going to be a possibility. So
yeah, I think people need to know that sometime this spring, before the end of the school year, that this is what's going to happen. Whether it may not be the details of what is going to happen, but this is what we're really thinking is going to happen. So.
Beth, you have a question?
Oh, what fun.
Can't wait. Tra-la, tra-la, tra-la. Thank you very much, Daisy.
Thank you.
Do we want him to stay up there for the...
Yes.
Yes, we do have a policy review, 14.01, which is the purchasing authority. And I think, have we had some input from Dr. Marty Is that incorporated into the current draft?
It actually, it didn't affect his comments. His comments didn't affect the policy. It was actually in the guidelines. So
Okay.
we've actually implemented that into the guidelines. And then there was two comments. One was there, and then the other one was already in place, and we have it in a policy elsewhere. So.
Okay. Great.
Okay.
Thank
We're
you.
already sending
And
them policies to review. Wow.
Are we abusing the privilege?
I'm not complaining. It's a good thing.
Well, we figured he was going to have to live with it, so. All right, and then 14.02, JE.BP student attendance.
Basically, what we're trying to do with the attendance policies, last year when we reviewed the policy and brought it forward with some changes to get a little bit more specific on what could be excused or unexcused absences, we did not have our new mission and vision and learning principles in place. And now that we do, we are hearing from the schools, or at least I am on the secondary level, that some of the specifics of the excused absences really don't address some of the needs of their students and some of the things that they would like to consider excused, but they felt like it didn't say it specifically in the policy. I'll give you an example. One is, say, a college visit. They weren't sure because it didn't say it was their college visit. So when you look at our vision, and that's where I would point at most when you start talking about our vision, we say that a student's going to be fully prepared for their next educational challenge. That fits under that category. Other vision statements that would allow principals with some flexibility we wanted to talk about acting out of a strong sense of personal, social, and civic responsibility. I think that's a strong one that covers a lot of categories.
Say it again.
Acting out of a strong sense of personal, social, and civic responsibility. So if there are other events that outside of school, maybe political or those type of things, that the principal would have the discretion if it felt it fit into that category. Another vision statement that would make sense is pursuing a personal direction based on an understanding of their talents or interests. So if a student was going to take a visit to some place or that may be based on something that they want to do in the future, we want to certainly support some acts like that. Other ones that may help us out with a little bit of flexibility is always
Yes.
But that would be another one, the understanding use of cultural knowledge. So the principals really felt that gave us flexibility dealing with some of the issues, some of the things parents are calling about. So they can, it really was almost a leverage to be able to go back to the teacher and say, hey, work with this kid. What they're doing is supporting our mission. It supports our mission. So that's the idea. Then the other change up to the handler designee, a lot of times in secondary schools, the assistant principals or grade level principals are making the judgment call on that. So the principals thought it would be important to under the premise of the recommended change.
Do you feel comfortable that from school to school everyone understands the spirit of this? And that if someone from United Hebrew goes to Washington, D.C. on their confirmation trip, they get excused, but someone from North High goes on the same trip and they get unexcused? I mean, do you think it will be applied evenly?
I think our school leaders, assistant principals, and principals clearly come with them. I think I would use the exact same terms that everybody understands the spirit of it.
And is there a way a parent can, what's the word? It's like appeal. Thank you. We should know those words very well.
Typically, any of the appeals would be at the building level. But I mean, certainly there's other avenues beyond the principal, but just in time. Thanks.
I took some time and I looked at the policies from some of our neighboring districts. And a lot of them just purely copied MSBA's suggested policy.
Right.
But I noticed, I think it was in Rockwood's policy, that they set forth some standards that students who know in advance are going to have an absence, of how the students should handle that in advance of their absence. And I thought a lot of that made sense. And I think a lot of what we're talking about tonight are things that we know about in advance. I think what you have laid out in the current policy are things, death or an illness or whatever. But the times the kids know they're going to need to be out of class, I think we might want to consider reviewing some ideas of what the student's responsibility is
Procedurally.
to communicate with the teacher, because I don't want the teachers to have to be at the beck and call of having to worry about catching students up. I think it would be great if our students that knew they were going to be gone could take some initiative and get with the teacher, find out what the work is, find out what the parameters are for making up work, and things like that, and keeping teachers in the loop so that they can be partners with kids in this, because basically, if we remember what our goal is, we're going to have to figure out a way that we can all get there together. So, it doesn't do a student any good if a teacher says, well, you weren't here, you missed that, because that doesn't achieve our goal. So I think putting some of the onus on our secondary students to get with their teachers, you might consider looking at some other districts' policies to see.
Okay.
Culture of accountability is spreading.
Well, I think what we had is we took a lot of what were in the guidelines last year and tried to place some things into policy. And I think it came into some of those. It's almost like you have two different animals, because you may have an elementary issue where I remember an example Dr. Maxey used last year where the pre-planned absence was a very long extended absence, and so the family expected weeks of work because they would be out of the country. And so it was one of those things where it was becoming happening too often at the elementary level. And so some of that was actually intentionally removed in order to address that issue. So you're right. I think when I talk to the secondary principals, that's kind of what we say we should do in standard practice. Is like, if a kid knows they're going to be out, or a family is going to know, email your teacher, let them know ahead of time, get your work. So if you have an opportunity, you really can be doing as much learning outside the classroom, so you don't miss it when you come back. So not that you're making up work later, but you're prepared when you come back. So I think in spirit and a lot of practice, I know there's times when probably it doesn't work to that extent, or that maybe a student doesn't know that it's okay to advocate in that way, but I do think it happens quite often.
Mm-hmm. Well, what concerns me is it's twofold. It's missing the learning, but it's also our high school students having it reflect their grade. If they are absent for some important reason that is, something that's supporting our mission and vision, and a teacher doesn't see it that way, even though they've said, school has said this is an excused absence, I don't want to see a kid suffer a lower grade because of, something that their parents have deemed to be important enough for them to miss class or something like that. And that's something that that really concerns me. I've heard a lot from parents whose younger child and an older child are both absent for the same reason in the same school. And the younger child's teachers say, oh, okay. And the older child who's applying to college, his teacher said, unexcused, your grade's going down.
Yeah, well, I think when that does happen, that's really against the spirit of what we want to do, because we're ultimately accountable for the student learning regardless. So to be punitive to a student isn't to anyone's benefit in the long run.
Right, and I think a school can see abuse when it happens. And I think that, as long as a student is really genuinely doing something that's deemed important,
Yeah, and I really believe that in most cases that happens, but I do think that there probably are cases where individual teachers want to use that as a leverage point, and I think that probably, I don't know if that gets addressed in policy or if that gets addressed in supervision. And
school leadership, I think.
Right, correct. Yeah. I think so. I think that's the level it needs to occur.
But specifically, an assistant principal came to me and said, your policy is too strict. We can't abide by the policy and do these other important things. So we really need you to look at it. And that's, why I think we need to look at it.
Yeah, okay.
I think I heard a phrase, might be being tossed around in Jeff City these days, about learning is the constant and time is the variable? Does our policy with the rewrite capture that notion, you think?
I think that's the attempt. I really do. I think that is the attempt. And the phrase really comes from, they're stealing it from probably Rick DeFore out of the Chicago area about professional learning communities and that sort of thing that they're looking at. I mean, we have so many structures in place that inhibit what our mission should be or what our mission is and wants to accomplish. I can even think of a conversation that Kathy and I had with Tim Hudson today about moving kids forward in math, and if they've really learned the material, how can we say they didn't pass first semester, but yet they've gained knowledge along the way and still showed that they learned the material later on? What can we do to maybe recover that prior thing so they're not scarred on transcript ways forever? Once they show they did what we needed them to do, they learned the material. So yeah, the same type of concept would apply here, I think.
After 11, we really start roasting some sacred cows. Any other questions or comments? All right. Both of those policies will be moved to the April 13 consent agenda. All right, 16.0. See if I got any tongue left here. Call for executive session, April 13, 2011. May I have a motion and a second that the Board of Education call for executive sessions on Wednesday, April 13, 2011 at 6:30 p.m. and or immediately following the regular meeting at Central Middle School for the purpose of considering, 1, legal actions, causes of action, or litigation involving the district and any confidential or privileged communication between the district or its representatives and its attorneys, 610.021.1. 2, hiring, firing, disciplining, or promoting of particular employees by the district when personal information about the employee is discussed or recorded, 610.021.3. 3, individually identifiable personnel records, performance ratings, and records pertaining to employees or applicants for employment, 610.021.13.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, Mrs. Calanda.
Yes.
Mrs. Feldman?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mogerman?
Yes.
Major?
Yes. Motion carries 5-0. May I have a motion and a second to adjourn the regular meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We are adjourned.